And zoning meeting for October 3rd, 2018 will now come to order. Please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Can we have roll call, please?
Chairman Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shavir, Secretary Chambers,
Here.
Member Baker. Here. Member Taylor. Here. Member Severs. Here. Member Noel Copeland. Here. School Board Member Hare. Here.
And we have quorum. Next is approval of minutes for September 19th, 2018. Is there a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must first fill out the oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath card contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chambers or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to procedures adopted in Resolution 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on an item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side for or against may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents you desire the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. Staff, has all items been properly advertised?
Yes.
Has anybody on this board had the opportunity to speak to anybody in the public or visit sites coming before us? Nope. Okay, with that, if we would go to first, now, we don't have to pull that off the table, do we? That was the one we tabled in the past, item A.
Item A is an item that you did table from a previous meeting, yes.
So, but was there expiration on that, or I think you said something in October on your motion when you did that. So I'm just wanting to be correct in procedures on that, if we have to remove that off the table or if we have to, just, you can move forward.
It is at the appropriate point for it to come off the table for this board to hear it. I will note that the applicant is not present in the room, and if you'd like to hear the second item on the agenda and proceed with that and allow the applicant an opportunity to show up at this meeting, I might recommend that would be a course of action you could consider. We're talking about, again, item 8A on the agenda, the right-of-way vacation.
Is the applicant, have you guys spoken to the applicant on this? Do they have intentions to come?
We have communicated with the applicant via email, gave them several reminders about tonight's meeting. They gave us no indication to withdraw this application or to table it.
All right.
So
I know that this was I actually watched the BAA on this, and so I would be surprised if they weren't showing. Huh? As you? Okay. So with that, would the board like to move up 9A in its place?
So moved.
Second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Okay, so 9A is a application for a small-scale amendment, and that starts on page 38 of your packet. So this is a small-scale amendment, comprehensive plan amendment with a rezoning request, including the same application, number 4 of this year. And it's requesting a future land use amendment from the Plan Unit Development Zoning District, the Plan Unit Development Land Use to a residential medium density land use, and to rezone the property from Plan Unit Development Zoning to the Residential Manufactured Housing Subdivision, RMH1 zoning district. And the applicant is requesting this small-scale amendment and rezoning to allow the creation of an additional lot for a mobile home within the San Mateo Village property. It says subdivision, but it's actually not going to be added or to the actual subdivision, or to the plat, rather. The proposed lot will be accessed via San Mateo Boulevard. The property is about half an acre, and is currently developed with a parking lot and an entrance signage for San Mateo Village. The new lot will be required to connect to city water and sewer, which are available on San Mateo Boulevard. If this small-scale amendment is approved, the owner must proceed through the city's lot split process to create the new lot and to allow for the mobile home. So on page 40 of your packet is the beginning of the staff report. Let's see. So the property, of course, is planned unit development zoning and has and it's being proposed to be residential manufactured housing, or MH1 zoning. The surrounding zoning and around on this property is multifamily to the north and PUDZ to the south, and to the east is RMH1, and to the west across the street on Sisson is single family. The requested, I'm starting on page 41 of your packet. I'm not going to read everything line by line. I'll just go summarize here if I can. The requested residential manufactured housing zoning district requires a minimum lot size to be 5,000 square feet in area with 50 feet in width. The minimum lot requirements will be reviewed once a lot split application is received. So we'll confirm that during an administrative review through the creation of the lot. All that's being requested of you before you tonight is to rezone the entire parking lot with that lot that they're going to create, and also to remove a couple of conditions from another ordinance, which I'll explain in a moment. This property was originally intended to be part of a future expansion of San Mateo Village. Now, the San Mateo Village subdivision was approved in the early 80s. It's a mobile home park. And then there was a second expansion of that area that was supposed to happen just south of it. So this particular area that's being requested to be changed right now was originally had the zoning of RMH1 on it. Then it was sold after the San Mateo subdivision was completed, sold to a new owner of the property to the south of it, rezoned to PUDZ to allow for planned development there in 2006. And then just recently, there was a subdivision approved according to that PUDZ zoning and is now under construction. And then now that property owner was deeded over this parking lot back to San Mateo, to the original portion of the subdivision, with some conditions that were approved of that ordinance. So I'll go and explain a little bit more as I go through the staff report. That's the crux of it, basically. It was originally RMH1 zoning, then it went to PUDZ, as it currently is, and now they're being requested to rezone it back to RMH1. So in the PUDZ zoning, which is on this property right now, there were several conditions applied to it. The parking area consisting of 24 spaces will be deeded to the San Mateo Homeowners Association. The vacant lot between the parking area and the residence to the east will be deeded to San Mateo Homeowners Association for vehicle storage. So where this new mobile home will be located is on that area that's described in Condition 2. I'll point that out on the map in a moment. The remaining conditions will apply to the planned development that's located to the south, and those will not be removed if this is approved. Okay. So starting about halfway down on page 41 of your packet, the future land use map amendment sprawl statement and review criteria, we believe that it's consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan. And starting on page 42 of your packet, we've responded to the statements regarding public facilities and whether they're available. Public streets are adequate to access the property. This lot is adjacent to a publicly maintained road. The land will support the proposed development. And there are no real environmental impacts that we could observe on this particular property. It is and so to respond to the consistency statements in the code related to its zoning, the lot meets the proposed dimensions of this lot meet the minimum zoning requirements for minimum lot width and minimum lot area per the regulations in the RMH1 zoning district. Additionally, this property was previously zoned RMH1 prior to the rezoning to PUDZ, as this property was originally intended to be future phase of San Mateo Village anyway. And then the remaining criteria here I'll just address quickly. The density or intensity of the proposed rezoning and use shall be consistent with the development in the area. The majority of the surrounding properties are developed with either single-family homes or mobile homes, so we believe this is consistent. Would not likely cause a depreciation of property values in the area. We don't believe the rezoning will do that. The application is consistent with the zoning in the area. We believe that the adjacent RMH1, this proposed request is consistent with that. The applicant will protect the public health, safety, morals, and welfare of the general public. The proposed land use and zoning change will not affect the public health, safety, morals, and welfare of the general public. Buffering and screening from adjacent uses. The development to the south has included with its approved development a 20-foot residential landscape buffer on the south side. And this particular property will have to meet the buffer or any screening requirements for the RMH1 zoning. And that will be dealt with during site permit. Substantial reasons why the property cannot be used in the existing zoning district. But the current PUD zoning on the property does not allow for a mobile home. And that's why it's being requested to go back to RMH1. So we recommend approval of this request. I'm just going to go touch on some of the maps that are in your packet just to give you some orientation of what we're talking about here. So on page 44 of your packet, I'm sorry, page 45 of your packet, that's a bigger map. You will see this, the area there identified as subject property. That includes the parking lot plus that grass area just to the east of the parking lot. The San Mateo subdivision is that platted subdivision you see with drainage pond there along adjacent to Sisson Road. The area that is striped to the south with a lot of vegetation there's a subdivision going in there right now, and that's called Forest Trace. And that is being constructed under the zoning of PUDZ. That will remain. So what this request will do is not only change the zoning on that portion where this parking lot is located, but will also change two conditions of the ordinance that governs this PUDZ located to the south. On page 46 of your packet is a closer look up, closer view of the subject area that's going to be rezoned. You can see the parking lot. That's currently used as an overflow for the clubhouse of San Mateo anyway. And you see it on the right there, there's a square. That is the proposed lot. The applicant will have to go through an administrative process to split that out to create this new residential lot, to put a new mobile home on it. We determined that it's actually going to have to be a little bigger than what you see described here. It may actually have to include the driveway you see on the right side of that parking lot and a couple of parking spaces. We did not see any conflict with the code regarding that. So that could be dealt with during the lot split process. On page 47 of your packet, you'll see this map indicates the current land use, which is planned unit development. And then on page 48, we describe the new land use on the property if approved, which will become residential medium density. On page 49 of your packet, you'll see the zoning map. It shows the current zoning of planned unit development zoning. And then on page 50 of your packet, you'll see a new zoning map that will show, if approved, a residential manufactured housing subdivision 1 zoning on that piece of property. On page 51 is the ordinance to change the land use. On page 53 is the ordinance to change the zoning. And then on page 55 is the ordinance to amend the two conditions that are governing the PUDZ located to the south, removing that requirement that this parking lot be only used for or that this piece of property that was dedicated and deeded to San Mateo HOA be restricted to the only use of a parking lot. And so by removing those conditions, you will allow the use of that piece of property to have a mobile home. And the rest of the packet just is the application. With that, I'll try and answer any questions you have about this.
All right, let's do this. Well, I had a quick question. I guess it's for staff. Before we open it to the public, I wanted to ask you two things. The first one, if you could answer. The second one, if you can maybe think about it, and if you don't know, come back. So you were saying that originally this was part of the PUD zoning for Forest Trace?
That's correct.
And then, so I'm curious if that was under a developer's agreement, Forest Trace?
No, sir.
No? Okay,
No.
good. I was thinking that if that would have to be modified
No.
to, and then the second one, which you don't have to answer right now, but is why was it deeded to be only a parking lot? And is there some history there that we should know about?
We looked into the history, and this is what we believe happened. With the San Mateo development that was approved in the early 80s, and you know, we didn't check to see whether that was approved in the county or in the city. We just saw that there was a plat approved in 1982, and then there was a subdivision that was complete, which is what you see there now as San Mateo right now. And then what we believe was Phase 2 was supposed to be that area to the south. We believe that the parking lot was supposed to be where the original clubhouse was supposed to go, but that didn't happen. We found a certificate of occupancy for the clubhouse that's currently located on the north side of San Mateo Boulevard. We could not find record of a permit for it, though. So it was approved somehow to be at that location. We believe then that the parking lot you see that's the subject of this property right now was the developer with the intent of going forward and completing Phase 2. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. And so when the Phase 2 piece of property was sold to a new property owner, it included that parking lot. So when that property owner decided to go forward with the PUDZ, Plan Unit Development process, their property included that parking lot, but they never had any intention of using it. So they decided to deed it over to the San Mateo HOA because they were using it as an overflow for their clubhouse. That's the history as we understand it.
Okay. Let me make sure I get this right. Member Severs?
On page 46, it does reflect the proposed mobile home lot to be carved out through a lot split, and you indicated that may need to be to comply with the code slightly larger. What is the plan with regard to the balance of the subject property?
I would have to defer to the applicant as to what their intent would be, but my understanding is that will continue to be used as a parking lot, the remaining of that property. So if this situation if this lot split was proposed to us with that included that driveway and those 2 parking spaces, that would actually meet the criteria for putting in a single-family home for a driveway. They probably wouldn't have to actually put a new one in. But I would have to defer to the applicant on how they would use the remainder of that parking lot.
Okay, there would be nothing to prohibit a subsequent application for an additional lot split for under the RMH-1 ordinance.
That's
Isn't that
possible.
correct?
That's possible. Yeah.
Okay. Does staff have any concerns about that? No. Okay. As far as the parking area that is a part of the subject property, none of that parking lot is required for the existing development?
That would be determined when they come in through the lot split. We would have to determine whether they're going to be creating a nonconformity of that issue. But if we didn't review that, we would review that during their lot split review process.
I mean, typically we do not want to create a non-conforming use by changing a portion of a property. So that's the reason why I'm asking the question. And I think it's important that we know that one way or the other as to whether or not they have been using this, and that was a part of the original approval that is still necessary for the mobile home park.
The clubhouse was built with that parking lot on the north side of San Mateo as one site development. What we could not find evidence that this additional parking lot was approved as part of that site development. So we would say that the parking lot located on the north side of San Mateo meets the requirement for parking at that time of approval for the clubhouse. This parking lot that's located on the south side, we believe was put there for an intended use for some other purpose. We don't know if that's part of, we don't believe it meets or is needed for the requirement of the property on the north side. But that's something we would review anyway during a site development permit with a lot split.
Okay.
All right, so we'll open this to the public. Do we have cards on this item?
Yes. Terry Murray.
Mr. Murray?
I'm the president of the HOA for San Mateo Village, and I put my name in there just in case there were some questions about what we were doing or what we were asking for. And I believe that Brad's done almost everything that, laid it out properly. So I don't know if you have any questions for me. My second vice president, Mel Helmer here, he has been working on this for a year with you people here in the city to get this to go. So he knows everything there is to know about this opportunity. So, do you have any questions?
I see none right now.
Pardon?
Right now, I see none.
Okay.
So, thank you. Next card?
Mel Hemmer.
I can answer. It seemed like there was some confusion what that parking lot was for in the beginning. We believe that parking lot was a model home that was to the east of that parking lot. And we just assumed that that parking lot was used at that time to sell the lots for San Mateo. And as far as expanding into the parking lot, we had that zone, and there was some confusion about the surveying, and they thought it was too small. Surveyor came back out and checked everything, readjusted things, and we do have 5,000 square foot up to that parking lot. So at this time, there shouldn't be any reason to encroach on that parking lot whatsoever.
I guess we're good.
Any other questions?
I see none. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Next card, please.
Don Lawless.
Yeah, hi. I own the house, Lot 44, which is on the east side of that proposed change. And I have an issue here that I was given this by the city. This is a diagram of what we've been told by the HOA is being severed off. That's the grass only, not they're taking a driveway out. The other concern is there's been no communication with the community. There's 113 houses. 9 people on the board have decided to do this. The last communication I received was on September 25th. It says, Terry Murray gave an update on our vacant lot number 68 across from the clubhouse. This is the vacant lot that the community has been told that they're going to use. In reality, they need to take at least 9 feet of the second driveway. The other issue is they put one lot there. As this gentleman said, they would have the right. There's 19,000 square feet. They could completely remove that parking lot, which is used on a daily basis. And I can't understand how the community shouldn't have a vote on an issue as important as this. How can 9 people out of there's 260 people in our community. This was delivered by the city. So everybody in the community believes that this lot is what they're taking. And they've communicated no change to that parking lot, to anyone in there, other than the 9 people on the board. And that concerns me. Because for 13 years this was here. Nobody did anything. All of a sudden now that's a lot. This property is not. But if they take 19,000 square feet, which is what they're proposing as RMH, they can develop all of it. This board may not want to, but it opens the door for future boards. As I say, we had this 13 years. It was never developed. All of a sudden, they decided they wanted to develop it. There's been no communication whatsoever on the alterations they're wishing to make here. No one has ever told us that this is going to become RMH property. The people in the community use this parking lot every day. Anybody from the city could drive down there. Sometimes you'll see 40 or 50 cars in there. Like, my concern in this issue is that out of 260 people, 9 people are making a decision to sell an asset of the community. I really don't see how, if our HOA bylaws say we can do that, then we need to change the HOA bylaws. I can't see any community where 9 people should decide to sell something. And if they're allowed to do this, then what's to say they don't want to sell the clubhouse? And we don't have a say. My concern is there's no restriction, once this is rezoned, they can't sell all this property out. Then we have no parking lot. If there's 260 people in here, that parking lot on the clubhouse is not enough space for everybody to go to a meeting. You know, that's my concern about this. I understand they want that lot. They think there's a lot there. They want the money for it. But if they rezone this as RMH, that opens a door for all this property to be rezoned, and we'll lose our parking lot. I have not seen anywhere or anyone say here that we've had a vote from the community and they support it. I've never gotten a letter saying, would you vote for this? The impression that everybody I spoke to, they're changing that lot and nothing else. Most people don't know anything about this. As far as they know, it's a parking lot. They're not aware that they're taking the driveway out here. Those things concern me. So, you know, I don't know what else to say about it, that other than the fact that we will have no right to say anything anymore. I'm not really sure how 9 people out of 260 can make a decision as critical as this. And as he pointed out, that parking lot, 5,000 square feet per lot. There's 19,000. There's 3 more lots. There's 3 lots there. That's what, and my concern is that the 9 people on the board get to do this. What's to say they can't, 5 years from now, develop the other 2 properties? And we'd have no control over that. Once this is rezoned RMH, they can go to the city and ask for amendments anytime they want. So that's why I'm opposed to it. In the present form, I'm opposed to it. Our understanding was they weren't going to do anything to the parking lot. They were going to rezone that piece of property. It's morphed into this, and I've never received one leaflet or letter or communication that this is what they're doing. So, in a different form, protecting our parking lot, then I might be for that. But certainly is eliminating our parking lot without the communication of the community, I don't think it's a good idea.
So before you go, though, I actually have a couple of people that have questions for you, too.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
So stay up there. Member Noel Copeland.
You said that the parking lot is regularly full. What are...
We have a church meeting on Wednesdays. They have bingo Tuesday night.
And so they're using the clubhouse parking lot and this additional parking lot regularly?
A lot of people park right in this corner. There were cars there today. They park right in this corner here.
I'm sorry, my question is as overflow to the clubhouse parking or as preference?
As preference and as overflow.
So
I don't know what the city ordinance is, but we have 113 homes. If we have 2 people in a home, that's 230 people. What if everybody wants to go to the meeting? If 50% go, you need 100 parking spots. We don't have that in that there.
So your other concern was you said they're going to take out this driveway. What's your concern about expanding the lot size to cover the driveway if there's another driveway going into that parking lot?
I guess the issue when you have a seniors community and most people are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, when they park across the street, they park as close as they can to get to that clubhouse. Now they're going to be moved farther and farther down. But then the issue is they sever this lot off. This is our
No, I understand you feel like it's a slippery slope.
Well, it is, because then they do this lot.
Yep, I understand that.
Then the next thing they do
Yep.
the next lot. Now we have 4 parking spots in the corner.
So my last question is, you're suggesting that this was never part of a HOA board meeting? The community hasn't voted on whether or not
No,
to
there's been
do
no
this?
vote. I asked the president, didn't we need a vote? And he said, no, we can do this. And I continued to ask. I questioned the lot size because it was not big enough.
Okay.
And the comment was, there's a flag at the edge of the parking lot, and there's a flag beside my house. That's what I was told was the lot size. That's not true.
And your house is just to the right on the picture?
Yeah, I'm the
of
one on the corner.
Red box?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And I don't mind that they want to put a house here at all.
Right.
It's the fact that I see a great concern in two issues. The parking lot could be removed completely by houses. The second one is that I don't feel that in a democratic society, 9 people should decide on a serious issue affecting a community. I just don't think that's right. So I don't know what else to say about it, you know.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, one more question. Secretary Chambers.
I was listening to what you said, or was said before. I'm a little confused. Was that parking lot originally there to service the,
Well, I really, that's always been in question. Nobody really seems to know. Anybody you ask, this parking lot has been used for the clubhouse for
That's
as
right.
long as anyone can remember. They really don't know whether it was used for the model home or it was an overflow for the clubhouse. Has been for probably since it was built. Since the parking lot was installed, it was used as an overflow for the clubhouse. And it still is.
so that's what everybody uses it for, is
That's right.
for the clubhouse?
Yeah. And my big concern is that they take that lot, that's fine, but now all of this is available now for development.
Now, if you take that parking lot away, you're saying that there's no available parking spaces for the community to go to the clubhouse, is that it?
I believe if the city was to investigate the parking facility we have for our clubhouse for 113 homes, is probably not large enough. I mean, maybe in 1982, when people had 1 car, people have 3 cars now. You know, everybody's driving.
Right.
There's a lot more cars now than there were 25, 30 years ago.
Okay.
That part of the slippery slope concerns, that's my issue with this whole thing, is that you're going to change this all to RMH when all they want is 1 lot. Like, why not just do the 1 lot? I'm not sure why they have to rezone the whole property. Is there an answer to that? Why?
I mean, I would think that it would be consistency with your other zoning, but, I mean, it's, honestly, it's reasonable to, in my opinion, it is reasonable to move that zoning to that because your entire property is that. Your entire plan.
Yeah.
So, but I understand your issue, but I think that it's duly noted. One of the things that I also live in a community. It's really up to your documents, your homeowners association, and how they handle the common element. That is your guiding.
I read
that
the
is-
HOA, and from what this says here, there's nothing in the HOA that I see that gives the 9 members of the board the right to sell an asset from the community.
But, I mean, I really can't, I don't want to get off topic
No,
on
no,
that
I
because
understand
that's
that.
not our business.
No, that's not
what
that's
we're
not why
for.
we're here for that. I
But my
understand
point
that.
is that is probably where you need to work at, is within your own, because in mine, my association can't do anything with the common element without a supermajority, like 60-something% of the owners.
So you get issues?
And we
Major
do,
issues?
yes,
Yeah.
but I don't know, yours
We
may be
didn't.
different. Yours, back then, homeowners association may be different.
If not legally, morally, and ethically, they should at least communicate to the people the truth about what's happening with this lot.
But my point is that we're not really here for the community problems, we're here for the zoning.
No, I understand that. I understand
But
that.
I do have one more person. Member Taylor?
It's my understanding, if staff can be clear on this, that your HOA, your declarations and your bylaws are a totally separate issue from
Yes, they
the
are.
planning and zoning, so we really
Yes.
have no
No, I understand that.
authority to come between the HOA. That would be a question
I
for
understand that.
an HOA attorney,
I understand that.
and you would have to check your documents to get clarification on that. Like Chairman Williams said, we're just looking at the zoning portion of it because
Yeah.
it's consistent with the zoning that's already there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would suggest that you would contact somebody that would give you some legal advice as far as that goes.
Yeah, okay,
Am I right in that, staff?
I would agree with that, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, and that's my only objection is that by rezoning RMH, we could lose that parking lot. In all likelihood. So then, I guess what the city, go to the city and ask them if they have enough parking on the other side of the road.
I live in an HOA as well. I mean, I'm not in a
Everybody
condo
does, don't
system, I'm
they?
in an HOA, but it's,
Yeah, they're all
you
different.
got totally separate issues that,
Yeah, yeah, okay,
and they can be really opposing, so.
yeah.
So this is what I'll say. My wife had an issue with our association with dogs because they were going to get rid of dogs. And no more dogs. My wife is a major pet person. So she sent out, on our expense, of course, letters to every single owner. And I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do, the right course, but my point is she empowered everybody to say, hey, we don't want to do this. Let's not go that far.
Yeah.
And it may be that, like you said, this association, this board, doesn't want to go that far, but it does give the ability for that to happen later. So it may be something you guys can handle internally. But that's really where it has to happen at.
Yeah,
on
no,
one
I
hand.
understand that. And that's not, I'm not bringing, I'm just, that's an issue that I have personally, that not anything to do with this. My concern with that rezoning is that they're creating 3 lots on that property.
The other part of this, and it was asked, was the clubhouse, was it dependent upon the parking on that? And staff basically said no. The clubhouse is not dependent upon that. They have, and I don't know, is that the old rules or is that the new parking?
Well, if I wasn't clear, what I was saying was that the parking lot that was approved with that clubhouse at the time was approved as a separate development. That you see on the south side, we couldn't find no evidence it was included as part of that overall clubhouse development. It was like it was something that was separately. That's some other.
Does the clubhouse, because of the, I guess the occupancy, do they have parking minimums that they have to meet?
Yes. So, and if, based on when it was approved, it would have had to meet the criteria at that time. So let's say our criteria changed in the event they increase the size of the building or make any major changes to it, then they would have to meet the new criteria. So right now, until that time, they have to abide by the criteria that was.
And you're saying that currently the north parking lot fulfills that requirement?
Well, I don't know that for sure, but I did, while you were speaking, I did try to do some analysis. I looked at it on Google Maps and tried to see if I could calculate the area of the building. And I estimated about 2,900 square feet, the clubhouse, as based on what I saw as a footprint on an aerial. And then there's a tool on the property appraiser that allows you to kind of measure the distance of and the size of the parking lot. And so based on that, I kind of estimated 15 plus spaces, which meets the minimum criteria for a use in our code related to public use and community services, which requires 1 space per 200 square feet. Right, so I estimate, and the property appraiser has a smaller number that I estimated. But if that's not the proper use, there is another one that's church-related, and that required 1 space per 150 square feet. So that might require some more additional parking. So I think at the time if they do any kind of major improvements, that would have to be determined. But based on what I see in the code, I would probably apply the public use and community service, which is 1 per 200 square feet, which is 15 spaces required. And I measured out that the parking lot that they have on the north side could accommodate maybe 15 spaces or more. But there's not, the problem I see on the aerial is it doesn't delineate the striped out spaces, so I can't confirm that.
So, with that, I mean.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to dismiss
No,
what
no,
you're
my,
saying, so please
as I
don't take it
said,
that way.
my big concern is that by rezoning that RMH, the community may lose that property as a parking lot.
But this may be a good opportunity to get everybody involved and.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, you can see that they're in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? My neighbor got this stuff from the city. He didn't understand what it meant. I had to try and explain it to him. He didn't understand it.
but it may, and the other part of what I'm saying is, as you were saying, this board
Yeah,
has no
no, it's a
intentions of doing
rezoning,
that.
and that's a-
So, but I'm saying that this is something that can be, if that is the intention, the board can put that down in the documents, or in the common element of your, this place, this is designated for that. That is some options, but it's an internal,
No,
which
it's
is
just the
not.
rezoning, and I understand that. So basically, my objection is that the loss of the parking lot in the future. That's
Sure.
what my concern is.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to confirm, clarify, yes, it is a rezoning, but there's also one additional element, and that's the removal of two conditions from another ordinance that states that the parking area consisting of 24 spaces will be deeded to San Mateo Homeowners Association, and that's being requested to be removed. And then another condition that the vacant land between the parking area and the residence to the east will be deeded to the HOA for vehicle storage, and this request also includes removing that condition. So I don't know if this is an opportunity where you can make adjustments to that language, maybe not remove those conditions entirely or amend them, but that's what you could recommend.
My understanding, though, is that they're literally giving this property to the association, right?
We own it.
Excuse me?
We own it.
I thought it was owned by the other
No.
development.
It's owned by our HOA.
Those conditions transferred ownership to the HOA.
We already own the property,
Okay,
right?
I understand. All right, one more. Member Noel Copeland.
So if you remove those two conditions, then who owns it? 'Cause-
The ownership is still with HOA. I think they still own it by deed, but those conditions pretty much restrict the usage
So
of
it
that
says
land.
the parking area consisting of 24 spaces will be deeded to the homeowners association.
that's been
So if you
accomplished.
strike that, but if you strike it, then it's no longer deeded to them, right?
No, that has already been completed.
So
That condition.
what's actually being struck?
So by taking out
Parking
those,
part?
if you take out those two conditions,
Uh-huh.
you're basically removing the restriction of use on
Okay.
that property.
So we could strike number 2 and not strike number 1, technically.
You could, or propose a different condition.
But by striking number 2 but not number 1, that protects the parking lot from further development.
It could be interpreted that if you leave condition 1, that the 24 spaces must be used for only parking.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, it could be interpreted that way.
Thank you.
Member Taylor.
I don't see where that's restricting the parking. It's, to me, the way I read it as they're just deeding that space to San Mateo. It doesn't say that they're taking the parking spaces away. It just says they're deeding that space to San Mateo. That's the way I'm reading it. Is that correct?
Like I said, when you leave that condition there, it leaves that interpretation open. That someone can make that use interpretation to say you are restricted to use that property only for parking. That was how it was, that's because it was deeded for that purpose.
It was deeded for that purpose, for
Correct.
the parking spaces.
It was like a historical reference, is what you're saying.
Right,
so.
but I still read it as they're just deeding that property. I don't see that they're changing the
If that was the,
parking.
if that was the case, they probably would not have mentioned 24 parking spaces.
Okay.
Okay. Next card.
Lee Hedrick.
Okay.
My
just-
name's Lee Hedrick, and I'm part of the,
I wanted to say something real quick before you.
okay?
So, Mr. Murray, I just want to let you know that you will have the opportunity to come up for a rebuttal. Not yet, after we go through the cards. Okay? So if you, thank you.
I got involved with this several months ago, back in last year. I've come to the city numerous times, talked to the gentleman. This property, back in 2006, was deeded, the board at that time negotiated with with the owner, and the owner says, because we had a piece of property of theirs that we've been using for 30 years as an RV lot. Well, when they wanted that subdivision, they decided, well, we need that lot, so you can't have that anymore. So then what they did with our homeowners association back in 2006, they said, what I'm going to do for you, I'm going to deed that parking lot plus this lot. But they put it all on one deed. Okay? Now, we're here, we want to separate that lot from this parking lot. Now, this parking lot is not going to change. It's going to maintain the same amount of spaces that was intended for. And yes, it's an overflow. We don't know how it even started, because I wasn't there 30 years ago. But anyway, we see, and when you come into our entrance, there's our sign. And then there's a piece of property that comes out squareways that belongs to that subdivision. They planted a bunch of trees. So now that line comes over to where our parking lot is, and then it goes back to that property. All we're asking for is, we've already got a survey. We know that that little lot on the other side, east side of that parking lot, is adequate enough to put a manufactured home. Before we can do that, we now have to separate it and then rezone it as a manufactured home, because it's deeded as an RV, if I remember right, for a storage, RV storage. We don't want RV storage. It's not big enough, and it's an eyesore to have an RV up front when people come into our subdivision. Now, we've been discussing this numerous times. I brought this up in our board meetings, that the city, a bunch of us didn't know this, because the board at that time, 2006, did this negotiation with the new owners and for Forest. This is how all of this started. Now, like I said, all we're asking for is, we want to separate that lot, period, and deed it as a MH1, not an RH1 or a parking lot or anything else. We want it as an MH1, part of our subdivision. Now, whether we get it sold, we don't know, but at least we know that it's capable of meeting a manufactured home rules and regulations. And we know that the water and the sewer and the electric can all be put in there at the expense of, if we decide to sell it, of the owner to do all that. So all we're asking you all tonight is to hear our comments and say, yes, I want to separate that lot from the parking lot, and yes, can I move it to an MH1? Okay? Is that clear? Do I need to answer any questions?
I don't know if it's so much of a question, but so if we were to put a condition on there that the parking lot is 24 spaces is to remain
A parking lot. Yes, sir.
You're only one of your board, but do you believe that that's something that your board would?
The board has already come up with this months and years ago.
But I'm just saying that because the motion can be made tonight.
Okay.
And the condition would be put on that. And then it still has to go to city council, but I'm just saying that way both sides are happy.
Yes.
Both sides, this side gets what they want, this side gets what they want.
Yeah.
No losses.
Yeah, we know.
Win-win, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we had no intentions of destroying that parking lot. Matter of fact, we're going to have, down the road, have to do some modification because it's old and it's getting, just like everybody else, we fall apart.
But going back to what I'm saying,
Yes.
you're saying that is something that would be acceptable to your board.
It should be, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, I don't see any questions. Well, you will, but let me go through the cards first, and so that I can bring you up during the rebuttal phase. So if you need to write something down, write it down, and, you know, but you'll be coming up shortly, because I saw another card come in, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
all.
Blair Hodley.
Hi, I'm a current resident of San Mateo Village also, and my concern really is this overflow parking lot. There's 113 units there, and that's 113 cars. This fellow just said there's room for 15 at the main clubhouse, so that overflow has always been used, and that's fine. I guess what was proposed originally on that piece of grass paper you got, that's lot 70 by 70, roughly. That's 4,900 square feet. Not big enough to make a lot. So that one part of the, I don't know, east, I guess, parking lot, double driveway there, what I'm led to believe is that's coming out. So that's in, out on both ends, but that's gone, like taken away in order to increase the lot size to 5,600 square feet or where it's supposed to be. So we're losing an access. Now, my concern is it required to have another access for a parking lot? Or are we just going to all come in this way now, turn around and whatever? And I've heard various things. They're going to put a wall up, a brick wall, and, you know, at the end of this parking lot. I've also told when I was at City Hall that there's supposed to be 7.5 feet of grass from that property line. Well, basically, if you look at the parking lot, it's a double driveway, and it's all concrete pavement, whatever it is. So when you cut this out, is that not supposed to be 7 feet of grass or whatever it is? Now we're losing more of that parking lot. And we don't have, and then are we required to put another driveway in to have the same as what we had before? And if this fellow said 50 parking spots, there's probably 40 or roughly in the other parking spots. That's 55. That covers half the community. And half the community never comes to half the meetings because they're all older, right? And they go to bed at 7 o'clock. But if they ever have a due, you know, whatever, some type of meeting or something like that, they do fill it up. So we're taking, as far as I know, they're taking some of that driveway out, and that's the problem I have, right? And then if they're and then for convenience, next thing you know, we'll be putting another driveway in. So like, then I got to say to myself, okay, the total cost of this does not make sense to sell even, because if you make 20,000, if you're lucky, and you got to spend 10,000 and put it back to normal, you didn't make anything. It wasn't worth the effort, right? So that's my concern about the driveway. It's coming out. I measured it. So I guess originally in Terry will tell you, I think they had 70 feet or something like that by 74, I'm guessing. But that doesn't fit the requirement of 5,600 square feet. It has to be 80 something because it backs onto the new Forest Trace. And Lee is right. They did trade that for the parking lot, make amends for every, you know, we'll give you this, you give us that. Everybody's happy, right? Anyways, I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay, I see. I don't have anybody
Okay.
asking. So
All right, thank you.
All right, and that was the last card.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Murray, if you come back up for rebuttal.
I'd just like to clarify a few things. The conversation to take this lot and to make it into another home availability started back in October of last year. Every time, we have a meeting every single month. We take minutes every month, and those minutes are put out there for our people to see. We have been discussing this since then, going through and working with Brad and working with this community here in order to break this apart so we can do this, okay? We as a board have two amendments that we need to put once this is done. First amendment is we have to go from 117 homes, not 112 or 113, okay? 117 homes to make it 118 homes. We have to make another amendment in order to make that lot, that parking lot, can never be changed from a parking lot. That will go in our charter. Those two, well, we can't do either one of those until this gets done. So that's one of the plans we're going to do, okay? As far as people not knowing, we've had many, many people of our community call me on the phone, come to my house, be at the board meetings to discuss what we were doing. The two gentlemen that were just up here come here from Canada, and they live here for approximately 5 months a year, okay? We send them different things. They should have the minutes. They get all the things that happen during the board. like I say, we do a board every single month, okay? That's in that information. And I've talked to many, many people. I've been doing this for 3 years now. And it's something that everybody says, where's that money going to go? It's going to go into the reserve for our HOA for future things to happen. That's what that money's going to go. It's not going in anybody's pocket, as they insinuated, as far as I can hear what they were talking about. It's not doing any of that stuff. It's going for the community. So I just want to clarify a few of those things. And all we're looking for is for that red-lined lot so that we can put an additional home. We never had any intentions of ever changing the 24 parking spots because we need those things when we have Christmas parties, Easter parties. We have parties every single month and dinners, okay? And it's needed. So, thank you.
Okay,
Any
thank you.
questions?
No? I think you answered that. The only question I was going to ask is if you were willing to entertain
Okay, thank you very much.
keeping the parking. Okay, Member Severs.
I assume, as a board member, that staff is satisfied that the applicant has the authority to submit that. So as far as the board, that is not a really issue for us to determine unless staff identifies that as an issue. I believe that whenever we take this item up, that we should consider the first two ordinances, the ordinance amending the future land use plan of the comprehensive plan from planned unit development to medium density residential, and the second and another ordinance, the actual rezoning of the property from PUDZ to RMH-1. There is a third ordinance in our packet that deals with removing those two conditions, and I think we need more, perhaps, discussion on how to address that. Unless someone has an objection, I would go ahead and move that we approve SSA number 4-2018 and amend the future land use plan, the comprehensive plan from the planned unit development to the medium density residential, and also approve for recommendation to the City Council the rezoning from planned unit development to the residential manufactured RMH-1 zoning district.
Let me do this real quick, and then we can bring back the section. All right, so we will close this to the public and bring back for the board. Were you making a motion? Was a motion, or was it for discussion?
Motion. That we approve the first two ordinances, not the third one. The third one has those two conditions in them. And we will discuss that separately.
Okay, so you want to, okay.
I heard a motion
Well,
and
you
then
know, we would have to,
discussion, so-
yeah, we would have to do different motions anyway, wouldn't we? Different ordinances, different motions.
It's up to the lawyer.
As it is a recommendation, I would be okay with taking the motion as it was presented for the two ordinances. Typically, yes, we do ask for separate motions, but I'm satisfied with the motion that Mr. Severs has prepared. If there would be a second, then you
I'll
could vote on
second.
that.
Okay. All right, let's take a vote on this.
Member Baker?
Yes.
Member Taylor?
Yes.
Secretary Chambers?
Yes.
Member Noel Copeland?
Yes.
Member Severs?
Yes.
Chairman Williams?
Yes. Okay.
And excuse me.
No, go ahead. I mean, I thought we were just.
The second item, is I heard the representative from the board, they are satisfied with leaving in the ordinance, which is ordinance number 57-2006. That is, it's amending that ordinance, leaving and not striking condition number 1, which is the provision the parking area consisting of 24 spaces would be deeded to the San Mateo Homeowners Association. Alternatively, if the board wants to, we could proceed with the ordinance as presented, subject to an analysis by staff that the parking areas comply with the code. Because certainly the city, when this subdivision was laid out and platted, had parking regulations within the zoning district itself. And so what's in the current code may or may not be accurate for purposes of what the original requirements were. But we could proceed either way if all of you are satisfied with just leaving number 1 in there, we can proceed that way. So that's just for discussion.
Okay, Member Noel Copeland.
I agree that we should just leave in the parking spaces, because I think what staff said was that we wouldn't look at the requirement for parking unless they did improvement on the building, that it's kind of as is unless they change something on the building, and then you'd readdress the current requirement. I don't think we can go back and impose the current parking requirement unless they do some improvements on the building. So as a result of that, I think we just leave in the number 1, which is that it is a parking area of 24 spaces. That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
If I may, does the exact number of 24 spaces, is that necessary? Or should it be just parking use?
I think it's necessary, because otherwise I think you could creep over one more lot and it might be a parking area of 10 parking spaces.
Okay.
So I would leave it as is rather than striking it out.
The only reason I bring that up is because, let's say, I know the applicant has indicated to us that they have a survey that shows that they can accommodate that the lot, as demonstrated in here, meets the minimum for that zoning district. But our analysis showed differently. So we haven't seen the survey that you provided to us. So if they provide to us that survey during their lot split process, and they're going to need to encroach into that parking lot in order to create that legal conforming lot, they're probably going to have an issue because this condition still remains.
But let's be realistic. Even if they take out the driveway, that should give them enough buffer space and the driveway is not parking.
Right, but there are 2 spaces at the end.
The back of it.
There is,
Back
but I
there,
mean,
that would be impacted.
let me, you're saying that the driveway has 2, what
yeah.
page is the?
46. So if you look at the map on 46, he's saying if you take out this driveway, you might be impacting these parking spaces to the back of it. So if you cut it right there, there might be
You're saying that driveway has.
parking at the back of the lot. So 22 parking spaces?
Yeah, but the problem is that we can't modify that ordinance.
So we
like
can
that.
either strike it or leave it, but we can't change it?
You could modify that. I think you have that ability to recommend that. You could recommend a modification.
So I would, if we're not going to leave it as 24 spaces, then I would recommend we leave it, we put a number in there, 20, some number, that it's not just parking area, because I do think that doesn't address the concern of the slippery slope of creating another, a second lot.
Yeah. Good. Member Baker.
Well, could we just do it that way and just have it reworded completely so that it only leaves parking and 1 additional lot, period? That there is no more.
You certainly could do that.
Well, but what we were saying is like, if you just leave in parking, parking could be 4 spaces. Parking could be.
Right, but if you can't have more than 1 lot for a mobile home, what are you going to do with the rest of it?
Well, but what we're.
Once it's rezoned, I think they could come back a year from now and get approval to make the second one a lot, if we haven't put the number in the parking spaces.
Well, I'm saying put the number on the lot, only allow 1 lot.
I don't know, but that's not in the ordinance.
We
But
would
you're saying
recommend.
we could modify it, so.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, staff would recommend that we just modify the conditions you have before you, either remove them or modify them. Adding new conditions, we would just recommend not doing that if there's a way to do that. But of course, it's your recommendation, so that would be our suggestion.
Okay. Member Taylor.
I was kind of thinking along the lines of Member Baker of just, if separate this one lot out and say you can only have this one lot and the remainder of the property is left for parking. I think that would be suffice, because that's not really going to change it. You may add the driveway to the lot for minimum lot size and take out 2 spaces, but then maybe they could reconfigure the current driveway. But can we just modify this to say the remainder of the property would be used for parking?
You can do that. I'm just suggesting for clarity, the easiest path would be to just take the language you had there before you and reduce the number. And that's a minor change, as opposed to what you're suggesting is creating brand-new language. So you're going to have to work together to come up with new language that we would need to include here.
Well, I would suggest that we revise the ordinance to just state a minimum of 20 parking spaces.
That's the path of least resistance.
Leaving item 1 in with a minimum of 20 spaces. That's what I would propose.
Good. So this is, originally I was thinking 22. 22 was in my number, but I think 20 would probably be better. Just because of, well, you said, how many did you say, 20, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it looks like there's maybe 2 at the back of the driveway, but make it 20 just to make it a round number. And that way it protects the majority of that for parking.
I had 22 spaces, and I was thinking that could be, that was in my head already. But I think that if, no, I can't make a motion because I'm chairman, but.
I do think you did have a motion, isn't it?
I'm just trying to make a motion that we
I'll second that.
leave in 1 and require.
But then, but the part of that is, then in your motion, you need to put the language, and that's why I didn't take it as a motion.
The parking area will consist of a minimum of 20 spaces. We'll leave in item 1 and reword it to say the parking area will consist of 20 spaces, minimum of 20 spaces deeded to San Mateo Homeowners Association.
Okay, and is there a
Second.
Okay, can we take a vote on this?
Secretary Chambers.
Yes.
Member Baker.
Yes.
Member Severs.
Yes.
Member Noel Copeland.
Yes.
Member Taylor.
Yes.
Chairman Williams.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Bear in mind, you still got to go to city council and start anew. So I think, in my opinion, I think both sides get what they want. You still have a lot to do on your board. But when's this go before council?
October 9th, it's Tuesday.
So if you guys go October 9th, and they can be finalized or not approved, but make sure that everybody's there on October 9th. All right, thank you, guys. All right, so with, we moved the first agenda item so that we give you time. So, all right, so did we have to take this off the table or not?
No.
Okay.
It's not personal. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So the next item before you is 9-8A. Right-of-way number 1, 2018, request to vacate a public right-of-way. These are very rare requests before you, and this one is a very complicated one, so I'll try my best to explain this to you, and I know you're going to have some questions about this. We have Mr. Lois Ward here to answer questions as well. He's the applicant. The staff received this request to vacate a portion of Parker Drive, which is a public right-of-way, and there's currently not a road there, but there are plenty of city utilities in there. There's a water line, there's a sewer line, very large ones, and a stormwater improvements there as well. The staff is recommending denial of this right-of-way and related resolution to vacate, abandon, and discontinue this public right-of-way at Parker Drive, located at north of the Block 62 revised plat of Indian River City, Plat Book 4, page 12, in the Brevard County Public Records. The applicant, Mr. Lois Ward, on behalf of the owner, Mr. Stephen Johnson, is requesting this public right-of-way vacate for purposes of allowing for a building permit for a home. We've included recommendations in the event that this is recommended for approval, and that if it is recommended for approval by you, we would recommend the following conditions we have listed here on page 9 of your packet, and I'm going to read those into the record. That a fully executed access and utility easements over the entire vacated right-of-way are received from those property owners adjacent to the right-of-way in a form acceptable to the city and consistent with the draft easement presented to council at the public hearing. This resolution shall not be recorded on the public records until compliance with all conditions is achieved and the approved easements are received by the city. Upon receipt, the easements shall be held in escrow pending the fulfillment of the conditions of the vacation. Another condition, that all necessary deeds, easements, and/or variances are obtained to ensure that those properties abutting the vacated portion of Parker Drive have legal access to a public right-of-way. And another condition, in the event that the compliance with the conditions set forth herein is not achieved within 90 days of the date of approval of this vacation, this resolution shall become null and void. And that was a recommendation from our city attorney to include a time frame, because there's quite a few moving parts to this. So on page 11 of your packet starts the staff report. This was initially scheduled before you on July 18th this year. It was tabled, and then I believe it was tabled again due to requests for a variances as well in order to resolve potential variances that were going before the Board of Adjustment. Those were, one of the application was heard, but that was also continued. And then another application that was originally submitted was recently requested to be withdrawn. I'll explain a little bit about what's been going on as I go through the staff report. The city denied a request for a building permit on a vacant piece of property that fronts on Parker Drive due to the lack of an improved road. Parker Drive is an unimproved public right-of-way. In other words, there is not a road to city standards on that public right-of-way. The City Titusville Land Development Regulations, Section 30-133, frontage and definitions 37-1, right-of-way and streets require property frontage on an improved street, not an unimproved right-of-way. In order to obtain a building permit, the applicant requests to vacate a 30 by 350-foot long portion of the unimproved right-of-way. The applicant will then deed the vacated right-of-way to the vacant parcel as a flag stem in order to provide legal access to Alpine Lane, which has an improved roadway. And so the aerial you see here in Figure 1 shows that. I've identified the vacant parcel, subject parcel, as it's drawn out by the property appraiser and as the current deed shows. And then there's another parcel there with the address of 3945, which has a house on it, and that fronts on Alpine Lane. An application requires the submittal of a letter from each utility agency with a potential interest in the right-of-way. The applicant received these letters. The city received these letters from the applicant from the following agencies. And so we require for this application letters that the applicant has to obtain from each of these agencies, including Florida Gas, which did not have any objection to this request to vacate this portion of the right-of-way, provided that there is an easement for maintenance and public utilities over this area, allow them to have access, to continued access in this area. Another letter from Florida Power and Light also did not object, provided an easement for the same reasons is recorded. Another letter from AT&T did not object to the vacate request. Spectrum, they had no objection. However, they also would like to have an easement for the same reasons. The City of Titusville Water Resources Department objected to the vacate request due to significant water and sewer utility infrastructure located in the public right-of-way. The department is also concerned with the possibility of being responsible for the repair of any potentially improvements such as a private driveway over this area or other improvements over the city's utilities. And so the City Water Resources Department is concerned about having to be responsible for maintaining or repairing, rather, a driveway over their utilities if in the event they have to go in and do a repair. Also, the Public Works Department did not have an objection, provided a easement for the same purposes as the other agencies was recorded to allow them to have continued access to be right away. And the fire department did not object. So on page 13 of your packet, you'll see a lot characteristics table with a snapshot of a survey that was provided to us by Mr. Lois Ward. It shows the current configuration of the vacant parcel, plus the property that is addressed 3945 Alpine Lane. And it also includes the proposed area to be vacated. This public right-of-way is 60 feet wide. The applicant is proposing to only vacate the south 30 feet portion of that. And then the entire length fronting both 3945 Alpine Lane and a vacant parcel for a distance of 350 feet. And I hope that's clear there on figure 2. The applicant is also suggesting, or requesting rather, in figure 3, the right to create a new parcel for a new building permit. And I tried to describe that here in the table on page 13 of your packet and the areas of those proposed flag lots that the applicant will ultimately like to have approved. Those flag lots obviously are going to be required to go through the Board of Adjustment because a flag lot in the city of Titusville is required to be 1 acre size. And both of these proposed flag lots do not meet that dimension. There was an initial variance request to allow for these 2 flag lots using the potentially vacated public right-of-way as a flag stem. The variance application number 4, I believe, 2018, was submitted to the Board of Adjustment and then was withdrawn. It was never heard by the Board of Adjustment, and we were not given a reason as to why. In the figure number 3, you'll see the tract A is the new potential area for this new building, and then tract B is what's remaining of the original vacant parcel with the new flag stems, provided the right-of-way is vacated. And then the 3945, the boundaries of that property will be reduced in size. That's the ultimate, what was presented to us. On page 14 of the packet, I'll start with the analysis here. The applicant is the owner of both properties located at 3945 Alpine Lane and the vacant parcel, the original subject parcel. In order to avoid vacating a public right-of-way, the staff recommended that a legal access be created by deeding a portion of the property located at 3945 Alpine Lane to the vacant parcel, thereby creating a flag lot. And in figure 4, you'll see what staff recommended. And obviously, that would have required a variance, and we suggested to the applicant that we could support that variance, provided the Board of Adjustment approves it, of course. So I stated here in the report, staff can support a variance to the Board of Adjustment appeals to allow this flag lot to be less than 1 acre. The image in figure 4 illustrates our recommendation. The image in figure 5 illustrates the possibility of creating a 25-foot wide flag stem, which is required by the code. You create a flag lot, the stem itself, which provides that legal access to a public right-of-way, has to be 25 feet wide. So we did not have a survey in front of us to identify the location of the building, of the existing house at 3945 Alpine Lane in relation to the property boundaries. So we used the property appraiser's online measuring tool and tried to do an estimate ourselves. So that's what I tried to illustrate here. And so I thought that there appeared to be enough distance between the building and the property line to create a minimum, a 25-foot wide flag stem as required by the code, and maintain the zoning district requirement in the R1B single-family zoning, side yard setback for the house of 10 feet. So that's what I estimated, but that obviously would have been subject to a boundary survey provided by the applicant, which we did not receive. The applicant is requesting to vacate a portion of, so I'm sorry, I'm on page 15 now of your packet. The applicant is requesting to vacate a portion of Parker Drive and deed it to the vacant parcel known as Tract B. So once this right-of-way is vacated, what happens immediately is that area that's vacated immediately goes to those properties. It doesn't automatically create flag lots. That's another process. That's an administrative process with us, with the city, that they would have to go through. So once this property, this area is vacated, again, those portions of that lot, of that right-of-way that's fronting along those two lots, 3945 Alpine and the vacant parcel, go to those properties, leaving the north 30 feet of right-of-way still as public. The applicant has also indicated that they would seek a variance to allow the flag lot to be less than the minimum 1 acre, which they originally submitted but withdrew. In addition, the applicant would like to create another flag lot, herein known as Tract A, in the image you see in Figure 6. In order to avoid vacating a public right-of-way and bring the variance to a minimum, the staff recommends allowing both flag lots to utilize the same flag stem through the property located at 3945 Alpine Lane. So what I'm showing here is that if they are going to propose to have a new parcel created in order to have a new building permit for a second home, that in order to avoid having to vacate this right-of-way, we suggested why not create a shared flag stem. That currently is not allowed in code right now too, but we could have supported a variance to that, provided the Board of Adjustment approves that. The applicant rejected that recommendation, they wanted to go forward with the original configuration you see in Figure 6. Section 17-33B of the Code of Ordinances lists the review criteria under which the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council review applications as they relate to rights-of-way vacates. And so here are our staff's findings on this. Consistency with the comprehensive plan. We found that in Policy 1.6.2 of the transportation element of the comprehensive plan states, the city may vacate street right-of-way only if it does not prevent reasonable connection for existing and future public transit, pedestrian, and non-motorized, motorized vehicle trips. The proposed area to be vacated could create a landlocked or non-conforming parcel. There is no guarantee that the portion of the area to be vacated that is abutting 3945 Alpine Lane and Tract A will be deeded to the vacated parcel to create a legal access. What I'm stating here is, again, the council would do one action, approve the vacate, and that portion of the right-of-way immediately goes to those parcels. It doesn't create flag lots automatically. That's another process. So what that means is the north 30 feet of this that's remaining of this public right-of-way is what's left. So in other words, it's just creating the same situation that they have right now, but actually worse, because now our city standards for a road in the city is that the public right-of-way has to be a minimum of 50 feet in order to create a road to city standards. So there would be no possibility of creating a road in that remaining 30 feet of Parker Drive. So again, approval of this request would be upon conditions that we have proposed that I read into the record earlier. On page 16 of the report, I'm sorry, the packet, another criteria that's in the code, benefit of the public, future needs, and environmental impacts. This request proposes to vacate a portion of Parker Drive. The city owns and maintains a significant utility infrastructure located in the unapproved public right-of-way. There is a 6-inch water main, an 8-inch sewer gravity main, and a manhole located within the public right-of-way. And so I try to illustrate that in the aerial in Figure 8. And these are just estimates of the locations of where those lines are. They are not exact, including the parcel boundaries you see here, which are based on property appraiser information, are not exact either. Another criteria, number 3, access to publicly accessible waters. We didn't see any issue with that one. The final criteria to vacate a public right-of-way that you should consider, number 4, impacts to utilities, access, and adjacent properties. The applicant contacted the appropriate agencies for comment regarding utilities. Several agencies requested that an access and utility easement be recorded as a condition of approving the right-of-way vacate. The Water Resources Department, however, objected to the vacate request due to significant water and sewer utility infrastructure. The department is also concerned with the possibility of being responsible for the repair of any private paved driveway or other improvement over the city's utilities. The staff is also unable to determine the specific location of city infrastructure within the proposed vacate area. The surveys submitted by the applicant do not include the location of existing infrastructure. The photo in Figure 9, when we did a site visit, this is just one of the images that we took, illustrate the type of infrastructure located within this public right-of-way. And as you can see in the aerial, in that photograph, Figure 9, that's looking from Alpine Lane On the right side of that image is the house. That's at 3945 Alpine Lane. And you can see there's markings there where cars and trucks have driven on this right-of-way. But we have been told that at one point this right-of-way was at one point maintained. We could not find evidence of that. The Public Works Department has stated that they do not have any intent to pave this or create a road to city standards, primarily because there's not funding and we have not been directed by City Council to do that. To finish here, another issue is the proposed area to be vacated could create a landlocked parcel. And again, there's no guarantee that the area to be vacated will be deeded to the vacated parcel to create a flag stem. Again, so if this is recommended for approval, we would recommend that those conditions I read earlier be approved. I'm sorry, there's one additional criteria. It's number 5, adverse impacts to historic areas, and we didn't see any. So again, the staff recommends denial of the vacate request due to significant water and sewer utility infrastructure located in the unimproved public right-of-way and the potential for creating a landlocked or non-conforming parcel. However, if the City Council is inclined to approve the vacate request, staff recommends that the access and utility easement dedicated to the city and other agencies in the form attached, and I'll go over that real quick as well, be executed and delivered to the city prior to recording the resolution to vacate Parkville Drive. So there's a series of steps that have to be followed. The easement should be released the city from any responsibility to repair private driveways and other improvements located within the vacated right-of-way. The applicant has indicated to us on several occasions that they do not accept this condition. The City Council should also consider the possibility of creating a landlocked or non-conforming parcel. The area to be vacated should not include the entire portion of the public right-of-way fronting the vacant parcel. The length of the proposed area to be vacated should be reduced in order to maintain access to a public right-of-way in the event the flag stem is not deeded to the vacant parcel. What this is talking about is creating an issue of an additional nonconformity, or creating a landlocked property, excuse me. The vacate resolution should be on condition that all variances necessary to establish legal access to an improved public right-of-way are approved by the Board of Adjustment. Approval of the effective date of the vacate resolution should be contingent upon that 90-day time frame. So on page 18 of your packet is the resolution with the conditions that I've read into the record. On page 20 of your packet, you'll see the draft grant of access and utility easement. On page 21 of your packet, paragraph D. This is where the applicant has disagreed with the city. It states in here that the city will not be responsible for the maintenance or repair of a driveway or private driveway over this public right-of-way. On page 24 of your packet, again, is the survey that was originally submitted to us with the proposed dimensions of the vacate area. And then on page 25 is the application. On page 29 is as an aerial with the originally proposed dimensions of the flag lots. Again, there was a variance application submitted, but was later withdrawn. And then starting on page 30 are the letters that were provided to us by the various agencies. And with that, I'll try and answer any questions you have about this request.
Let's open this to the public. We have a card on this.
I didn't get anything turned in.
Well, you're the applicant, so if you come up. But if you would, he needs to fill out a card. So after this, if you wouldn't mind.
Sorry, back in the old days, applicants didn't have to. I'd be glad to do one. And I apologize for being late. I frankly forgot it was at 6 instead of 6:30. One other comment before I get to my presentation. Mr. Sievers, if I may address you, sir, we've known each other a long time, and tonight I heard you say something I've never heard you say before. You said, leave it up to the attorney. I thought that was rather a new phrase you've learned.
I guess they never leave it up to me, okay?
Sorry, I digress. If you're not confused after the presentation, I know I am, and I've been working with this since January. The real issue and the beginning of this is Mr. Johnson owns property that's been in his family since 1984 on Parker Drive. And Parker Drive is a dirt street. It is not paved. My interpretation, and he applied for a permit. He said he refused to accept the building permit application because it's on a dirt street. Now, we all know there's houses in Titusville on dirt streets. Most of them are from years gone by. But this property is a part of Indian River City. It was annexed to the city in '64. Mr. Johnson, my client, and his father and his sons were born there and raised there. And the city regularly maintained and graded Parker Drive. The city's now refusing to issue a permit or even consider a permit because the road is in the condition it's in. And the reason the road's in the condition it's in is grassed over, and there are just a couple of, well, there's actually two real distinct tracks where cars go by. And it is used regularly. It's used regularly by people in the neighborhood. Delivery trucks, there are industrial uses up again on the east side of Cape Ron up against the railroad track. They come and drive down that road. It is a substantial road. It's not a dirt trail in the woods where it hasn't been cleared and full of potholes. It is passable and it is usable. We have letters from emergency people, including Florida Power and Light, and fire department people who attest to the fact that it's being used. So the real issue is not before you, but I'm giving you the background tonight. If it's a street or it isn't a street, it meets all the zoning criteria. It meets it's zoned R1B. It's about twice the size of an R1B lot. And so when I got involved in this, I wrote a letter. I was getting, staff kept referring me to section 3133 of the code, which doesn't apply to this. It's in the subdivision ordinance. This is subdivided property. We're not asking to do a subdivision. We're just asking to build a house. The appropriate code is chapter 28, which refers to zoning regulations and criteria, and it defines what the frontage and access is, and that's in 28-5. And it says nothing about a paved street. And then it's really ironic, I digress again for just a minute, that here we are, staff opposing, and, well, I got to say this first. So since I was getting conflicting information and kept insisting on the proper code and for them to tell me what they were basing their decision on, which I never got until 6 months later, but anyhow, I wrote a letter to the city attorney asking for a definition, and I didn't get one, but I was requested to have a meeting with Mr. Broom and Ms. Busaka. And we discussed the matter in some detail. And then Ms. Busaka assured me that should we apply, that instead of arguing about whether it was a street or permit or not, staff would support, and I'll repeat again, staff would support a request for a variance and create a flag lot. So we went about applying for the variance of flag lot, and guess what? Public Works denied it, objected because, water resource, because there's water and sewer. We know water and sewer. That's another thing you need to understand. In 1998, 99, the city of Titusville, using public funds, put in sewer and water and utility services to this very piece of property. Why in heaven's name did the city spend public funds to put in a sewer and a water and service laterals to this property if it wasn't a legal building site? It seems to me, in my uneducated opinion, is that, gee, if it's not a legal lot, why are you spending public money to put services to it? But that only is just to make the point that I sincerely believe with all my heart that it is a legal lot and they should have a building permit. So then we apply for this variance and as you, I mean, for this vacation, you see staff is now taking the position that they're opposed to it. And they're opposed to it, and one of the reasons they're opposed to it is they say, well, gee, someday it might want to be a road. Well, we say, have at it, go right ahead, make a road, pave it tomorrow, if that's your problem. But the city, after a property was annexed in '64, spent tons of money paving virtually every dirt street in Indian River City. They were virtually all dirt at the time. They used various forms of funding to pave the roads and the streets in all those residential neighborhoods, including GEX tax revenue, not just city taxpayer dollars. There were state and federal funds used to pave a bunch of those roads. And this little piece of Parker Drive never got paved because no one lived on that short portion. It's just about 500-600 feet, goes from Alpine over to Capron. But I'll repeat, it is used. It's used by public. It's used by the city trucks. The city still, they stopped, and we had at the variance meeting, and I can get an affidavit from the gentleman for later actions, but Mr. Ortiz was assistant city manager at the time. He is now on the Board of Adjustment Appeals, and he attested to the fact at the meeting that the city stopped grading that roadway in 1999, 2000, because of budgetary constraints. And Tom Harmer was the city manager, and that's when it happened. Mr. Ortiz was assistant city manager, and I think Dwight might have been city attorney. But at that time, they arbitrarily decided to stop doing the maintenance. It is a city right-of-way. The maintenance is their responsibility. So y'all need to make whatever recommendation you want to, and we'll do what we have to do thereafter. But we don't want the road vacated. If the city wants it to stay a road, we're happy to pay the road. All we want to do is build a house. But the city says that we have to pave it to current city standards, which is also hypocritical. City paved several roads without curb and gutter, without sidewalk, without adequate drainage. They've done it in my neighborhood, and they've done it in other neighborhoods because it really wasn't a need for it. But when it comes to sending public dollars, they're a little more chintzy. But when it comes to the private side, they want you. And the cost of paving that road from Alpine to Capron to current city standards would cost about twice as much as a man's house. This is basically a denial of a man's property rights, if not his civil rights. He's owned that property, he's paid taxes on it, it's been assessed at that. The city has put in infrastructure, spent money, public dollars to do that, and now they're telling the man he can't use his house. So we withdrew the other vacation because it gets, the other variance for flag lots, because we've now applied for a variance just to build on a dirt street. And we're going to pursue that variance, and if we get denied, then there's action that can be taken after that, too. But you got too confusing. Staff kept moving it. It's a moving target. They say, we'll support this if you do that. You say support that. After they come out with wanting to post the vacation, I met with Ms. Busaka, and I wanted her to tell me in writing, and I was going to go to the Board of Adjustment Appeals because I have a different interpretation of the code than she has. And when you have a difference, the proper action, go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeal. I think the man deserves a permit, and I wanted to do that. Then Ms. Bisaka promised me, the second broken promise, if I would not appeal, she would support the other request. And then we filed that, and it's recommended for denial also. So we're not really happy. We are not happy campers at all. I'll be glad to, I'm sure I've overlooked some other information, but having any questions or that I can answer, I'll be glad to try to do so.
Okay, I do have a question. Member Noel Copeland?
You said you applied for a variance to build on a dirt road. When will that be heard? When will you know the answer to that?
That's next month at BAA. It was supposed to be this last month, but we had some health issues with my client, and
So if that gets approved, then this goes
This would be
away?
moot. But that, see, that's the chicken and egg stuff, you know?
Right.
And your recommendation doesn't make anything happen. We can't go to council until y'all take action on the variance. I mean, excuse me, vacation, I'm getting myself confused. On the vacation that's before you tonight.
But is your preference
But
that
we
you
want
get
the
the,
option to go back and reapply for the other if we're denied the first one. But when we had two things on the Board of Adjustments at one time, it's too confusing and too many
Right.
issues, and it's a mess.
but if you
It's
get
got to be a
this,
mess.
this variance to build on a dirt road, then you're good to go. You don't need this.
We'll withdraw the petition to City Council, but I want to keep my options open. That's why I'm here tonight, for you to take whatever recommendation you want to do and keep our options open, because it's always possible BAA will deny the other variance request, and then we got to go back to
Okay,
and
thank
start
you.
over.
Mr.
But we
Severs.
withdrew it, excuse me, we withdrew it because there were two opposing
withdrew this one?
requests on the variances.
No,
We
have
were-
you withdrawn the variance to build on a dirt road?
No,
Okay, that one is still
that's number
active.
6, and that's all we're asking for.
Okay, but that one's still active.
We're, for the sake of argument, accepting, for the sake of that petition, staff's position that it has to be on Page Street. Code doesn't say that, but we've accepted that for the purpose of the application, and we're asking, if in fact I'm wrong, she's right, we still want a variance.
Okay, thank you.
That's simple language.
Mr. Severs.
A couple of questions or observations. One question, Mr. Johnson's property, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson's property at 3945 Alpine.
Yes, sir.
Will it comply with the code if you deed a portion of it off to Track A?
Yes, but it's not acceptable, so it doesn't matter. We won't do that. The staff is sitting, creating a flag lot, taking some of that off the side of that lot. That would require about $5,000–6,000 worth of taking out 100-foot tall pine trees all across the side yard. But yes, it still would be a legal parcel if you cut 25 feet off of it.
Well, the reason why I ask, because I see drawings showing that in our packet.
That's a staff drawing, not our.
That was our
a
estimate.
staff- That was staff coming up with their own ideas, not
Okay.
our request. Not our request, and we don't accept it.
And I see on the staff's report, it does show where the water and sewer line is, and I know just as a matter of information that those water and sewer lines go west from there, and I don't know whether staff has checked, at least half, or if not more, of this right-of-way has been vacated west of Alpine.
That's correct.
All west
So
of Alpine.
what my question is, why is this property owner being treated differently than all those other property owners who have in the past added for vacation of right-of-way, and there's that same water and sewer line present?
There was, in the 80s, I believe, there was a request to vacate all of Parker Drive between Hopkins and
I think it goes all the way to Rainey.
I believe you're right, yes, the Rainey. And the reason for that vacate request was to allow for a portion of that right-of-way to go to the Lucida development for perimeter stormwater treatment, and then the southern part of that right-of-way, I believe, went to the adjacent property owners there.
Well, for example, the property right across the street from 3945 owns, I guess, half of the right-of-way.
Correct. Yeah. It looks like they own
So
the remaining, that
why
entire.
is this applicant different than all those other parcels?
What we found in the record was that the Public Works Director did not have any objection to the vacate request for everything between Alpine and Rainey, because it would not have created an issue for them as far as creating a landlocked parcel or the utilities there actually were, a recorded easement was put in place to allow them to have access.
Okay,
But-
where is there a landlocked parcel? Because I
Not-
don't see that.
There is not.
What
It's
the
been
pu-
said repeatedly before, and it's not true, and I wish it would quit being repeated.
What we found in the public record was that the Public Works Department and the Community Development Department objected to the vacate request for the portion of Parker Drive between Capron and Alpine because of this particular lot. Because by vacating it, there would be no potential public access thereby to this.
But isn't that what you're saying now? There's no public access, so we can't build a permit. So which is it?
To a right-of-way, sir. And so, because if you vacate that area there, what happens is that entire public right-of-way will go to the north, that whole portion that's fronting 3945 will go to 3945. That portion that goes to 3940, which is on Capron, that's on the north side, will go to them. And then that portion in front of this vacant piece of property that's north of it, all of it goes to them, creating no frontage on any public right-of-way whatsoever for this vacant piece of property. And that's what the Public Works Department and the Community Development Department at that time objected to. So that is why this portion of Parker Drive was excluded from that vacate back in the 80s.
No, it was excluded because they didn't have the right to do it at the time, right? Because they didn't have those property owners' agreement to do so.
Well, one thing I would note for the record is that this plat originally was platted in 1924 in the county.
Correct.
And there was a revised plat that has subsequently been done. The city did not annex this property until 1963. And I specifically recall the improvements on what we called the missile streets.
Mm-hmm.
And we assessed the property owners.
Some was done that way.
Yes, we assessed the property owners because I had the pleasure of foreclosing some of those liens against property owners. So a lot of property owners in this area were assessed for the public improvement as such.
And my client just may agree to a fair, proper cost sharing such a way, but that hasn't been offered, wasn't done. It said pay for the whole thing at your risk, who's your property, your neighbor's property, and the guy down the street, and the guy that lives up north.
With regard to the easement that I assume was prepared by the city attorney's office, it was related to us that you have an objection to subparagraph D.
Yes, sir.
Why is that?
My understanding of that is that you vacate the road, we get an easement, and Mr. Johnson puts in a driveway to his house, and then the city has to maintain the sewer line or repair the line. That language says they can tear up his driveway, not put it back, and Mr. Johnson's out of the driveway. We have no objection whatsoever if it's treated like everybody else is treated. Virtually every city, as you well know, and I'm sure most of the rest of you do, sewer lines go down the middle of the street. You go right out here, there's a sewer line in the middle of the street. What happens if that sewer line gets broken and has to get fixed? The city digs it up and they repave the street. We won't be treated the same. If you've got to get in there, tear up my driveway, put it back. We're not going to put anything in that. We don't want the right to put anything in it other than a driveway to access the man's property.
Well,
and if you tear that up, you should put it back.
I find this provision pretty standard provision. That is, if the city has to come in per their easement that and tears up your driveway, it's not going to be the city's, they're not going to pay the cost of your driveway.
If you tear it up, you are, or we're not going to agree to it.
I hear you. Okay.
And I'm saying my position is that's no different. First of all, a water line doesn't matter, it's over the side. The actual sewer line is right down the center of the right-of-way, which will be on the very north edge of the 30 feet we're asking. It's a 60-foot right-of-way. The sewer line is dead center in the center of that right-of-way. The sewer line will be on the top, so the actual driveway position, if we had someone trying to work with us to solve something instead of create problems, the driveway can easily be put between the water line, between the sewer line, and it really won't be an issue. But the fact that you can come out, if you have an easement, you come out there and and you tear through my yard tear my fence down and whatnot, to do something, you have to put it back. And that's all we're asking. Put it back in the condition you got there. And that's the same thing you do if it's a public right-of-way. Not any additional expense to anybody than normal business.
That's all the questions I have for now.
Secretary Chambers.
Correct.
Stay there, please.
Can't the city just go out there and find out where their pipelines are and their underground facilities are before? Huh?
It is, but he's talking here and it's over there.
No, okay.
Here, I'll turn mine on. So we'll get you.
No. Can't the city just go out there and find out exactly where the pipelines are, our main lines, and water lines, and gas lines, and whatever else, and find out exactly where they're at before saying yes or no to this guy's proposition for building a house?
I believe that would be an expense to the city, and this is a request by an applicant, so it's really the onus is on the applicant to do that. Now, if you want to make that recommendation and request the city do that, I think that the Water Resources Department and the Public Works Department are probably going to say that they're going to have to ask council for funding for that.
Well, it's hard for them to say no to this guy unless they know for sure where their pipelines are. We should have some kind of a drawing map showing where our underground facilities are in that area anyway. So it'd just be a matter of updating what we already have. Just go back out there and find out if they are where they're supposed to be or if they're there at all.
Well, I mean, think of it this scenario. So let's say we do know exactly where those are located, and you can put a driveway in there that's 12 feet wide for one car to go on it at a time, in between these two lines. So I'm just throwing that as a scenario, for example. And so let's say there's an issue with one of the lines and there needs to be a significant repair there. The only means of getting onto that right-of-way, getting to that particular line, is by using the applicant's driveway. So now we're in a position where if there's damage to that, we are responsible for it. And so what the Water Resources Department is saying is that with this easement here, we won't have to we won't be responsible for that. In other words, this is the applicant's onus. They're trying to put this in here, this improvement, and they're responsible for that improvement. So that's basically what the issue is here. So
well, can't the city just say, look, you can't put the driveway right there because our pipelines are underneath there?
Well, that's where the flag.
If they did that, if that's a condition, then the applicant is going to have to prove where these are. So they're going to have to do that survey themselves or pay for that themselves and provide that information to us. I don't see the Water Resources Department going out and identifying this information for the benefit of the applicant. That's a cost to the city.
Mr. Chairman, I might help with that issue if I speak.
Yeah, I mean,
We would have no objection to that condition, the driveway placed between where it's not over any existing utilities, and I will provide certified survey to show location. We're not asking the city to spend any money, we're just asking for some reason.
well, and that's why I kind of had some issues with that as well, because they're asking for public utility easement, basically, where you can't, I didn't quite understand how, that's what you were asking for, right? Basically saying a public easement for the utilities. And my thought on that was, it's uncommon, maybe I'm wrong, to put a permanent structure over an easement. But you've done this for a lot of years. And so.
That's the point I was trying to make. We're talking, every sewer line in the city is under a paved street, right down in the middle of it.
But I'm talking about on private property. That's,
Well,
because now
and
this would be private property.
I can show you tons of them where they're in easements between houses. You try to avoid that because it's not the best situation, but sometimes practical solutions have to be sought and done. But the fact it's under pavement is very common. There's not a water line or sewer line that's not under some pavement somewhere.
Yes, but I'm just
They're all
saying
underground.
generally the practice is to avoid it.
And we would happily agree to that a condition.
Okay, so The reason why I wanted to stay up here, I want to let you know, I actually watched BAA on this. I did. I was like, wow. I'm so glad I'm not on that board. I mean, it was a long meeting, but it really interested me because I thought, wow, what unique questions, and I could see all sides. And then one of the questions I had was, what was the end result of that? And I thought they tabled it, but then you withdrew that motion.
No, it's still confusing. There's two requests.
Yes, okay.
They tabled the one.
Okay, which one did they table?
Well, they actually tabled both, and then subsequent to that meeting, I withdrew number 4 because it was too confusing.
So which one did you withdraw?
The first one, which
I know, but when you say first, I'm like, you could,
yeah.
1, 2, and 3.
The first one, which was a request for flag lots.
Okay.
In the event we got the vacation.
Okay, so my
If
impression.
we get the vacation, then we'll have to reapply, and the second one gets denied, then we'll have to reapply for the first.
My impression on the flag lots was they were real clear. We don't want flag lots because it's going to cost $1,000 a tree to pull it down.
Right.
And I think you guys said 8 trees or whatever, maybe, but now it's 5.
I haven't counted them, but it's that.
But,
close.
so that wasn't the optimal position that you wanted, was the flag lots. And then, but one of the things that perplexed me at that meeting was, and so to stay there, but this is really for staff, is that, so you're going for variances on whether they can build on dirt road, if that's what it is. But I would have thought that would have come to this board for that, I guess, interpretation.
No, because it's varying a section of the code that otherwise would not allow that use on that.
But what I'm saying is, in the interpretation of the code where it says the land development regulations, it would say, like, and this is what he was talking about. It nowhere says, but I can't validate it for myself, that you can't build on dirt roads. And that was one of the things that was up in arms in that meeting, okay? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is normally under interpretations of the code for land development, that would have come to this board, not a variance, right? And because we're technically 2 boards.
The Planning Commission has the power to interpret a use of the zoning, but to vary a section of the code of a development standard, no. That's a Board of Adjustment function. I think is that what you're asking?
Well, I mean, it's, I guess, I mean, okay, so.
The dispute is to section 37, which is the definition section of the code, and it defines a street. It does not use the word paved.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, I'm listening to both sides on that, and, I mean, there is some interpretation there, and as well as in Titusville. I mean, I've seen up in the 90s, maybe probably still today, we have existing houses on dirt roads, or we did.
We do.
So I say, there is a standard there already that already exists, that what he's saying was doable, and is, if it's out of code or it's not up to par with code, the code isn't saying that it's not, according to what the meeting that I listened to. Go ahead.
Okay. We would disagree. Our administrative interpretation of what the code says is based on various sections of the code. That there is a public right-of-way, and this parcel does have frontage on that public right-of-way, but there's currently not a road to city standards. So you can't we would not approve a building permit on a road that is, or I'm sorry, on a public road right-of-way that does not have a road to city standards.
And what code section says that?
Hold on.
We've mentioned.
So here's what I heard on that meeting, though. It said, does the city have codes for dirt roads? And they said, no. The city said, hey, we will rely on the county codes for dirt roads. Is that what I was? You didn't say that?
No.
Well, maybe that was the board that was talking about that. Okay. But point is that a dirt road is a street. And I think that I'm probably going way off topic on this, and maybe I need to go back to just dealing with the vacation, but the point is that there's more here than, this is why I was telling you, this could be a long one, but.
We could be here till long.
But honestly, so if I was just to do that, let me go back to just this. I think Mr. Sievers made a very valid point. If we say you did it on this side, it's very difficult to say on this side. And we can't look at what their intentions are then, and we only say, can they have the vacation? And so then and the same thing would be said to the city. You need to not look at the intentions, is it doable, right? Now, on the denial on Public Works, I think they were the only ones that came in and denied. That was Mrs. Smith. But then the director came in and said he was willing to do basically he wanted an easement over a partial. He wanted a partial.
So I'm going to throw out the two variances that were submitted to the Board of Adjustment and just give you a brief description of what that is. And Mr. Westward can correct me if I make a mistake on the description here. So the original variance application was to allow for a flag lot using the vacated portion of the right-of-way as that stem. The Water Resources Department, the Public Works Department did not have an issue with vacating that portion of the right-of-way provided an easement was recorded, just for access. Water Resources initially objected to it. Then we spoke with them. They said, well, okay, we'll accept an easement, but it's got to be an easement that really holds us harmless from having to repair their improvements. That's where the objection came from the applicant. They did not accept that recommendation from the Water Resources. Therefore, Water Resources recommendation is denial. Now, for the other variance that was submitted.
That is the reason for denial, is because they're not.
Well, that is the reason for a Water Resources recommendation for denial of the vacate that you see here tonight.
But, okay.
Now, that variance that was submitted in order to help resolve, or be able to resolve this vacate, when it happened, if it did happen, was to allow for that newly vacated portion of the right-of-way to become flag stems. That's what that variance was dealing with.
Yes.
That's been withdrawn now. It's not even going to be considered by the Board of Adjustment. So now the only variances available to them to consider is another one to allow the parcel to have a building permit for a new home fronting on a public right-of-way without a city street. And so we reviewed that, and we thought that that would probably be sufficient. However, when that was reviewed by Public Works, they came out with serious concerns about that. So now it's Public Works concerned about that particular variance in that scenario. And so there were two emails that were provided to us by Kevin Cook, the Public Works Director, and we provided that application to the Board of Adjustment. And that was discussed during that meeting that you reviewed. That variance is still open. It was continued to October 24th. His concerns are, while he does support staff's suggestion that the area is not a stabilized, unpaved road.
Right, that's why it was confusing, because the only objection I saw was really from Ashley Smith, and I thought he supported it.
But Mr. Parrish is now talking about the variance and not the vacation.
Okay.
Right, you're talking
more and more confusing.
If you're talking about the vacate that happened back in the 80s, is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm just saying that, go ahead.
Okay. This variance that was submitted to just allow a building permit for a house on an unimproved public right-of-way was objected to by the Public Works Director for various reasons. And if you'd like, I can read this to the record, but I know of how that relevant is to you tonight.
No, it's not. It's not, because it's not even on our board. But I'm just saying, in our packet, we have all these different scenarios going on, and I'm familiar with it, but it's like, I mean, on one hand, I say, if we give them the vacate, you vacate this, now you don't have a public street, okay? It goes through. Now you have a problem. If they just said, look, it's done, it's a done deal, and now it's no longer a public street, and you don't get the flag lot approved or vacation approved, now it is legally landlocked.
And who cares? We have to build on it anyway. What do we lose,
But
really?
you said if they vacate, it's no longer a public
You're-
street, but they're suggesting it's already not a public street.
No, no, no,
They're
that's
not-
what they're saying, but you're saying that.
No,
you're-
he's saying he thinks it is a street, but I think you're saying that it's already not a street, which is why he can't build on it as is.
He's saying it's not an improved.
It's indisputable that it's a street. The issue is,
But I was just
whether
going to your
it's
point that
paved
you
or
said
not.
if it's vacated, there's no longer a public street. But I think the argument is it's already not, right? Is that your argument?
has
for
the
all practical
possibility to be.
purposes, that's staff position, if I may.
that-
There's not a city street there. No, no, ma'am.
But my point is it becomes private property with
What-
this, and now there's no possibility.
Right, if the city council accepts the resolution to vacate without any conditions, what they potentially could end up doing to themselves is creating a lot that fronts on a public right-of-way that has no ability to ever have a road on it, because our city standards require that a road must be put into a public right-of-way a minimum 50 feet wide. And what would be remaining there is 30 feet. And so you have a bigger issue then. Now, however, if the council approves a resolution to vacate with the conditions that we've recommended in here, provided the applicant approves and accepts the easement language, then we can move forward.
May I please respond? I should shut up, but I
mean,
can't help myself.
Please do, you're still up there and we haven't closed it, so.
If it's not obvious to everybody in the room that effort is being made, concerted effort, just to keep the man from building his house, I promise you we would accept a condition. And see, no one asks for solving problems, they just want to create them. If they're worried about, please let me finish. If you want to build a road there and you want to vacate part of it now and you want to have a reverter clause that says when you want to pave it, we'll give it back, trust me, we would not have a problem with that. Now, would we? Would anybody? This is not a problem. It's a creation of a problem. There are solutions if you want to try to solve them. And if you don't, there won't be any. And that's where we are.
Mr. Sievers.
As I understand it, the Public Works Director, Mr. Kevin Cook, in his letter of May 2nd, indicates he has no objection to vacation of the right-of-way as long as an easement is granted for city access for drainage systems. Has that changed?
No, sir. For the vacate, no, sir.
Okay. And the only objection that we had was from Water Resources. And as I understood Mr. Ward to say and represent to us, that he has no objections of installing their driveways to ensure they are not over the top of the water and sewer line. Did I understand that correctly?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, that's what I understood. And you would stipulate that being a condition of any
Absolutely,
approval?
without reservation, because that's not where we'd want to put it anyhow. I mean, yes, we'd agree to it.
Okay.
Not,
And based upon all this discussion, in addition to, I know what staff's recommendation was, but if the right-of-way is vacated, is there any other conditions you feel as though should be included? For example, are you asking that a condition be included that a variance be obtained for this to be, these lots to be flag lots?
Yes, if I may direct you to page 18 of your agenda packet, that's the resolution that would vacate this property. And section 2 contains 3 conditions. And if you look at section 2B, that all necessary, I'll let you all get to page 18. Section 2B states that the approval of this resolution is conditional on the following: that all necessary deeds, easements, and/or variances.
Again, what page are you on?
18 of the agenda packet.
Okay.
that's a resolution.
Okay.
2B requires that any variance that's required for legal access be obtained as a condition to this resolution,
Okay.
which would implicate the flag lot And I don't know if staff can comment on if the flag could be on the southern portion of 3945, or if it would need to be as depicted. And I don't know if the trees are all along that western boundary of that property or not.
That could be determined at site review or when they come in with their lot split. But it could be on the north side of 3945 Alpine or on the south side. But they just have to prove to us with the survey that you're not creating a nonconformity with the existing home as far as meeting setbacks in that lot.
Sure.
So they could do either way. They have options.
And for the record, the applicant had absolutely no objections to conditions stated in that resolution.
Not even the 90 days?
Even the easement, sir?
Well, it's the condition of the easement we have a problem with. Not that we give an easement. We don't have a problem. We've always, it
city
would be
would-
unreasonable not to give you an easement.
The city's proposed an
What
easement.
I'm suggesting is perhaps either you or your client, as well as the city, might be satisfied with the stipulation, since these driveways are not going to be over the top, that your concerns about the conditions that probably the city attorney's office has included there might go away.
That's possible to work that out.
Right.
Appreciate this.
I would
information.
expect people to work together to work things out. That's what I would expect.
My only concern, sir, is that the Water Resources Department is not, what you're doing is you're asking the city to go forward and allocate funds to identify the location of these lines, and provided these lines, it might not even satisfy them.
I'm not
depending on where they're
suggesting
located.
that. The burden is upon the applicant.
And we've already
And
stated.
he can do that.
That's fine.
He can do that.
I'll do it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's what I gathered.
He can do that.
But what I thought the section 2 on page 18C, with the 90-day, I've never seen that language before, that it reverts back if we don't get everything done within 90 days. And I thought that was harsh. You don't have an issue
We
with
like
that.
a little more than 90 days because we've been at this since January, and I have no expectation to get
I
it
just know
resolved
that-
in 90 days.
I mean, you hear that people take up to a year to get things done.
I would be okay changing it to 180 days.
You have no objection to that?
Listen to the attorney.
Right, okay. So it sounds like we're in agreement. So let's do this. All right, I guess that's it. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we close it to the
I've
public?
said enough.
Okay, so we'll close this item to the public, bring it back for the board. Any more discussions or any more input? Okay. Do we have a motion on this item?
To make one.
Mr. Severs.
I would make a motion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the City Council the vacation of the subject right-of-way, including those conditions in the staff recommended conditions, and I'm looking on their report that listed A, B, and C, and also including in the resolution that the Assistant City Attorney identified by changing one of the dates from 90 days to 180 days, and also that a condition, further condition be included that the driveway access to those parcels not be over the water or sewer lines, and that it would be the responsibility of the applicant to locate them as such. So with all the conditions the staff recommend, with additional changes and that additional condition. So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. Can we take a vote on this?
Member Baker? Yes. Member Taylor? Yes. Secretary Chambers?
Debating here. That's- No.
Member Severs?
Yes.
Member Noel Copeland?
Yes.
Chairman Williams?
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Was it
5-1.
5-1.
Mr.
Oh,
Chambers?
yeah, I'm sorry. And for your reasonings of why you voted no.
I still think, just going over this packet again, the city needs to know exactly on that unpaid or paid road that we don't have any sewer pipes or lines in there someplace. That, from what I understand, they act like they're not sure where those lines are. So if he builds his house out there on his property and some of those lines are near what he's supposed to, and then there's no access to them, or he builds something on this house that's going over top of some of them, then what do you do then? That's why I said no, until they find out for sure where those sewer lines and water lines and other underground piping are, for sure.
Okay. All right, there you go. So that was the last item. Hopefully this will help. I know that this wasn't the ideal for them, but I mean, it's a step forward for you.
It's progress. I thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so if we will go to, this is horrible. I swear, I hate, maybe I get the laser died or something. All right, so if we will go to, what is it? Reports, city staff.
We have a schedule change for you. You will not have a meeting on October 17th. The city council has taken over this chambers for another meeting, and we did not have an agenda for you. And what we initially had wanted to present to you that night, we had rescheduled to November 7th, and that's our draft comprehensive plan. So we'll bring that to you, the presentation of the draft plan on November 7th, and I believe there are a couple other items on there as well, including some ordinances. So your next meeting will be November 7th.
Okay. Assistant City Attorney.
Just an administrative update to the board that your chairman has provided a request to City Council for his leave of absence for the dates October 17th through the end of November. That request will be heard by City Council on Tuesday, October 9th. And I will lead into that because the city code requires that the attendance of all members is consistent. And if you happen to miss more than 3 consecutive meetings, then your participation on this commission is so waived, and the chairman shall inform the council. There is an opportunity for council to excuse the absences upon request of any member, and we are at that time where there is a member here, Mr. Chambers, has missed several meetings. I think it was due to health, and you may speak on this if you'd like to. You don't have to. But if you would like to ask the council to excuse your absences, then I'll ask that the chairman include that in his memo that he'll have to write based on the attendance record that I received from the board secretary. So if the board has any discussion or comment that they would like to make, or if Mr. Chambers would like to make a request of the chair for the memo, now would be an appropriate time to do so.
I do request.
Are there any questions of the members regarding the attendance policy? I have the attendance record in front of me.
I wasn't having fun on doing this, to tell you that.
We do appreciate your participation here, and I look forward to seeing you all back in November. I will ask for a motion if you would like to ask the commission as a group to agree with the chairman in his recommendation to council that member Chambers' absences be excused. If you all agree, I think that would be appropriate.
So moved.
Second.
Just all, what do you want to do? How do you want to do this?
So if everything that I've said, as it sounds like, is all in agreement with the commission, then staff will prepare a memo that has memorialized what I've just said, saying that Mr. Chambers was unable to attend due to health reasons.
He says,
And
I'm talking about the vote. Do we just say aye, or do we go through, or?
Consensus is fine.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. So we have a consensus that we would like to excuse his absences.
We'll have a memo prepared and we'll send it over to you for your signature.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
That concludes my report.
Okay, so let's do this. Petitions and requests from public present. Mr. Ward, anything you'd like to say?
Absolutely not.
Anything you'd like to say? Okay. So we will go down the list. Mrs. Hare, anything from the school board?
I have a very short one from the Brevard School Board. So I'll read it to you. We are still working on our 5-year work plan and expected to put it on the October 23rd school board agenda. At this time, we believe there will be a new elementary school plan for Central Brevard in the Viera area. That is booming right now. And then he also had one more point, and he said the enrollment at Quest and Manatee, which I'm not familiar with, I think that's in South Brevard, is above projections, and all the surrounding schools are close to maximum capacity. And usually when it gets like that, they're going to be building. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Severs.
Yes, sir. As a follow-up to the last meeting, I'd ask a question as far as the sidewalk along US 1 at Titusville Landing. I didn't know whether staff had a response to me on that.
The sidewalk, from what we found, was approved with the master plan and its location, primarily because of the issues as far as topography, from what I understand. So what the developer did was put the stormwater pond or retention area closer to the road, and a 5-foot wide sidewalk was put on the interior part of the property. So when you're at that intersection of Harrison and US 1, you just walk the length of that short portion of that retention area, and then above the retention area is that sidewalk that takes you further to the other side to where the driveway is. So that's how that was resolved, and it's because of the issues there. Otherwise, the sidewalk would have to be right adjacent to the street itself, which a lot of people will find uncomfortable to walk on. So that, we thought at that time, was an acceptable compromise with the developer to provide some sense of safety away from the road and still resolve some of the issues they were having as far as the retention requirements.
I mean, to the public, it appears that this is a sidewalk on the property of Titus Landing. Certainly, the retention pond could be moved over 3 feet and accomplish the same thing. Is there a written agreement as far as maintenance of that sidewalks? Typically, sidewalks along public streets are maintained by the city or DOT.
I'm sure there is, and I'll see if we can find that specific
I'd like to see what it says. Okay. The second item that I brought up at the last meeting involved the clear cutting of land and section 30-324 of the code, which in my mind really prohibits that, and because of the requirements. I used as an example a couple of recent subdivisions. Also, I expressed concern about whether that was going to occur on Willow Creek site plan and whether it was going to occur in the Brookshire development. As you know, Mr. Parrish, you and I spoke before the last council meeting, and you advised me that Brookshire had applied for a variance. And I have received a copy of that variance application and been reviewing it. I frankly think at some point in time we need to review the sketch plan concept and the information received. I'm certainly not faulting the Planning and Zoning Commission in its review of that because it only had very limited information. But what is obvious or apparent whenever you attempt to install 176 lots, tract subdivision on top of a parcel that varies in elevation from 70 feet to 60 feet in various ups and downs, and you end up with what is proposed, which is a road that goes from Carpenter Road to Garden Street that does not vary in elevation more than 5 feet through the entire length, and you have that variance, then what happens? All these is clear cutting of land. There will not be one tree, except maybe along the landscape buffer left, if that variance is approved. That variance asks for 5 different areas in which to cut up to 14 feet. And frankly, the city of Titusville might as well rip the Aquifer Protection Code out of its books, the Tree Protection Code out of its books, and the topography section out of its books, if that is approved, because it's going to be graded as a flat parcel of property. I see, just looking at it, wetlands being filled. I look at the wetlands map and I see them being filled as much as 10 to 15 feet, just based upon the drawings. Now, whether or not this Planning and Zoning Commission was informed of that through the sketch plan process, I sincerely doubt, because I've seen the material that was presented to them, and frankly, looking at it on the computer, you can't tell of the change of elevation and what's going on. And I think there needs, at some point in time, be an honest discussion about the site, the sketch plan process and what it really means. Because if I'm an owner or developer and have my engineers, well, they approve this. So I'm going to go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars in reliance upon that approval. I mean, there's even retaining walls along adjacent properties because there's such a change of elevation on that site. I mean, one thing, I'm very familiar with that site, obviously very familiar with those codes, because once upon a time, Brevard Community College owned that land, and their attorney once upon a time told me his fee was he could remove and mine the soil and haul it away as his attorney fee, and obviously I was involved in stopping them doing that, because obviously you can't do that without necessary permits or approval. But of course, it's interesting to me now, that 20-foot hole they dug, now they wanted to take the 40 or 50-foot elevation and fill that hole. And obviously, I'm not sure this Planning and Zoning Commission is aware of what was approved, what they approved. And I know I've had discussions, as you have seen, with Peggy, and because I read the site plan as requiring you locate the mitigation trees and the wooded areas, because that's literally what it says, and I can read it right here. And she is telling me, well, that's not required until preliminary site plan, preliminary plat, excuse me, using the wrong words. And how in the world the city could even consider, or the Board of Adjustment could consider removing all those trees without even, through the variance request they have pending, without even having a diagram before them, it doesn't make common sense. It just doesn't make common sense. So I think we need to have a serious discussion at some point as to how we got here. And I know you and I have talked just a little bit about that, and I honestly believe I have no problem with that property being developed. But they should respect the land like the code contemplates, and they can build their lots, maybe not as many, on that property and concentrate, as you and I talked about, some of the development in certain locations, having large lots maybe in another location, and everybody can win from that situation.
Member Severs, I agree with you. There are a lot of things that probably could have been brought before to P&Z. I think we gave to you maybe the minimum, what was required. If there is, you'd like to have a discussion about maybe amending our code to require additional submittals that you considered as part of future applications for a sketch plat, we can do that. That provide a little more detailed information for you to consider. That's something we can certainly do. Obviously, the question about preserving certain areas of the land, we tried to have that discussion with them, with the applicant. We did propose to them at one point going through what's called even a cluster subdivision process or even a conservation subdivision process or a planned development to try and see if we can negotiate with them and work on allowing them to have smaller lots, conserve some areas. They came back and suggested that what they want to do is utilize the zoning that's on the property now, which currently doesn't even require a minimum open space. So we're limited by what the code says. I certainly think there's always room for improvement. I totally agree with you on that. We can certainly look into the code and bring some ideas to you. What Peggy was suggesting, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Likewise, they're limited to what the code says also.
Yeah, you mentioned about the mitigation trees. The mitigation, I think if we provided to you, if we required them to have a tree survey up front that identified which trees they would mitigate for the Planning and Zoning Commission to review, I wonder what you would be reviewing exactly. Would you be negotiating which trees and measuring them out?
No, but
identifying, calculating which they would take or not?
As the code clearly says, I don't know how, honestly, you can do your job unless you know where they are, because you're supposed to have a discussion with them, move the road over this way or that way. How can you even have that discussion?
I think that what they gave to us was aerials that showed the concentration of where the trees are. Now, they did try to come to us and say that all they wanted to do was provide a tree survey of just our boundaries, and that's something we disagreed with. We think they need to provide to us for the entire property something that shows a tree survey. And they are required to do that with a site plan. The preliminary plat is the site plan, and it's the engineering review. So they have to provide that to us. Now, obviously, if they have a significant mitigation requirement, they're probably going to have to come back and revise the location of maybe some of the lots and the roads to kind of reduce that mitigation requirement. Otherwise, they pay into a fund to the city. And so that's okay.
I understand the city historically has liked to have this fund and receive lots of money to it. What we're talking about here in this particular instance is a preservation of our aquifer in the Aquifer Protection District. That's what we're talking about. The city has seen over the years, and if staff digs, you will find it, that because of development close to the wellheads, there's been a decline in the water being able to be pumped from wells. That's an absolute fact. You look at the 2005 technical report prepared by Pat Barnes, you will see that in there. In 2005, interesting enough, there was a number of ordinances prepared that created different diagrams, circles, whatever you want to call it, around wellheads. It's interesting to me that probably 4 out of the 5 areas they want variances to cut up to 14 feet are within those circles. I mean, that's totally ironical that you would cut them down and you have less percolation, you have less storage of water because of that, and whenever you're not protecting the wellhead. It makes absolutely no sense. The city of Titusville has a superficial aquifer, and it's like a bubble. And matter of fact, the water table somewhat follows the contour of the land. You cut off the hill, guess what? The water table drops. So you have less water. And this impacts all the citizens of Titusville. And I would hope staff in particular would take that into consideration when they're reviewing this variance application, because this can have an impact upon those wells along I-95 right across the highway from these properties. And there are ways in which, just because they have the zoning R1B, R1C, does not mean we ignore the Aquifer Protection District and all those other codes. And matter of fact, I think there's issues as to whether or not it's consistent with the comprehensive plan as their present development proposes.
If I may respond to the variance, they tabled it because of our request for changes. And so they proposed to us some changes based on some recommendations by the city's engineer and by the Water Resources Department, specifically asking them to consider elevating the roads and some other changes in there that will help reduce the need for the significant variance that they're requesting. So we're evaluating that right now. We should have a report available soon.
Good. Well, the additional concern I have, and I've known historically it's been an issue, many applicants, engineers say, well, your code allows up to 8 feet cut, so I can automatically do that. Look at the 2000 amendment to that code. Look at what it says. Just because there's allowance of 8 feet doesn't mean you get it. And that was inserted in there just because so many people were trying to say, well, I can cut off 8 feet. In this instance, they want to go up to 14 feet, so it's not even close. I mean, I apologize for taking so long, but this particular issue is obviously significant to me. I lived across the street from this area. I'm very familiar with it and involved in drafting all those codes. And to see them, frankly, thrown out and ignored, and I realize staff hasn't completed their report, is very concerning. Of all the pieces of property that are left to be developed in the city of Titusville, those codes are more specifically designed to protect that one piece of property than any other land in the city of Titusville. And for it to come out that we're just going to bulldoze and level the land, that's amazing to me. We have accomplished nothing if we allow that. And they can develop it. I know how much they paid for the land. They can make plenty of money if they have even less number of lots. So I just ask staff to carefully look at that.
We'll certainly do that. And get back to the commission on those questions. Yes, sir.
I was just going to add on that because, I mean, I've watched the information literally change from when I first started here to now. The information that we used to get was extremely more detailed, but the process changed because we wanted to speed everything up. We wanted to make it cheaper for development. Because we were saying, look, they're spending so much money for these preliminary, they had to have drawing after drawing after drawing, and Titusville was being accused of being a burden upon developers, and development wasn't happening here. And so all this changed, and that's the price, is that we can't make clear decisions. We used to get tree surveys. We used to get traffic studies. We used to get everything that would help us make a decision we would get. And I would say that there was more scrutiny back in the day than what we can actually give now. I mean, I've never liked the fact that we went that direction. On the other hand, I don't like it now when I hear people saying you can't develop in Titusville because we've relaxed so much to allow for that. So when I say relax, I'm saying we've streamlined the process so much. And so it would be good to get more information to help make decisions, but I know that it has to be in constraints of the code. So, but believe me, it's not intentional. If things slip by, but it's very difficult to make decisions on. I always call it the domino effect. You don't realize the decision you're making until the very end, because you don't have all the pieces. So, all right, Member Noel Copeland.
No report.
Secretary Chambers.
No.
Member Baker.
I'd like to thank Mr. Severs for his very detailed information to the city staff. It is so important. He is so right. It is so very important that we make sure that these things are taken care of. I spent quite a bit of time fighting for that same piece of property, trying to make sure that the water was preserved, and the city of Titusville as a whole has, I feel, in my personal opinion, has not done some of the things that they should have done to protect that. It is vital to, we are not on the Florida aquifer, so we can be in trouble real quick with lack of water, and this really needs to be taken care of. There's also some incredible plants on this property. There is a tree that, none of us are small people sitting up here. Anywhere in this room, there is a tree on that property that is bigger than any three of us in this room could reach their arms around. It is a huge tree. It is massive. My husband and I and another lady tried to reach around it, and we could not. That is a shame to have to bulldoze that because someone wants to put a road through there. And things like that need to be taken care of. There are terrestrial orchids on that property. There are other things on that property that are very valuable. And it may not be something that you can stop the development, but you need to change things when you have trees like that. That's the only tree in North Brevard that I know that's anywhere close to that size. And when I looked it up on the internet, the only tree I could find that was about the same size in Central Florida, it comes in like number 3.
Did it?
That's all I have to
Thank
say
you.
right now.
Member Taylor.
I would like to commend you as well. I'm thankful that we have someone with your knowledge to present to the staff your opinion.
One other thing I'd like to mention, I don't know whether, I drive down Carden Street and Carpenter Road frequently. I noticed the only notice of variance side was across the street from South Lake Elementary, and there was none on Carpenter Road. After my discussions back and forth with staff, I believe they'll erect a sign on Carpenter Road because the people on Carpenter Road, on and off Carpenter Road, are more affected by this than people on Garden Street across from South Lake Elementary. And they need to be aware, the purpose of these notices is to give notice to the public, so they're aware of what's going on.
I also would like to ask staff, there was a post on Facebook about Kennedy Point Yacht Club. They're going to be building condos there and across the street, and a 200 slot marina. Is there any validity to this?
We are only aware of discussions with an potential property owner of the Kennedy Point Marina and their desire to put in a hotel with convention center there, with parking garage, not across the street. We haven't heard anything about that.
So they're going to put it in on the riverside.
That's right. That's what their intent is.
Are they going to leave the current building, the condos that are there?
Yeah, that'll be separate.
Okay.
Yeah. And their intent is to revitalize the marina there. It's a pretty significant proposal. They haven't given anything to us formally, but we've had discussions with some interested parties about it. What they're proposing, though, is going to require some significant adjustments to the code, variances, and things of that nature. So they're trying to figure out a way to get something before the city soon.
Down south of, just south of 405, there's a sold sign. Do you have any idea where, I can't, it's only about a half a mile south of 405. There, the real estate sign says sold on it. Do you know, are you aware of anything going on down there?
I'm going to assume you're talking about the Vector Space property development? On US 1? South?
Possibly, but it's a vacant lot where the sign is. I mean, it's,
If I'm correct in which property you're talking about, there's a vacant piece of property. That whole Riverfront Center is what the new road is called now, that goes internally to that development that used to be called Vector Space, is zoned and it's got rights to put in some industrial uses there and hotels. And in fact, I think one of the parcels right now is a hotel that's going to be constructed on it.
because I know that we had brought before us, about a year ago, they proposed to put a hotel conference center there on the corner. I don't know if I got that wrong, if it was not the corner or if it was down there. But you're not aware of anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
City Attorney.
Brad, I was reading the Sentinel last week, and there was an article in there about Titusville, and they said that they were going to be building on that property a Hyatt,
Well,
a five-story Hyatt.
If it's the same property, there is a parcel in the development that they are building a hotel on. So I don't know if that, I think what you're talking about is a different parcel though. I could be the same.
A little bit further south than 405, but it's not very far from 405.
This hotel will be located on the entrance of Riverfront Center from US 1, I believe on the south side of that intersection.
Hey, did you hear him? I heard him groan from here. Go ahead.
If we're done with the development discussion, I didn't want to interrupt that, but I wanted to follow up Mr. Seaver's conversation with just a quick reminder that this board does need to discuss the appointment for a TEC liaison. If you want to discuss that now, it might be appropriate time. You don't have to, but we are looking for a volunteer or a appointed member from the Planning and Zoning Commission to step into the role for the TEC participation.
So, yeah, we had a discussion on this, and Mr. Shabir stepped down some time ago, and we haven't had a replacement. So one of the things that we do have to have somebody fill it in, it's twice a month. Once a month. Mr. Sievers said that if nobody else is willing to fill this, he's willing, but I don't know if that's if somebody else would like it, now's the time. Going once, going twice. So, I mean, if this is something that you're truly interested in, if nobody else is truly interested in this, I mean, this is...
I think there was some conversation last time we talked about it about whether it could be a rotation. And I don't know if we ever got an answer back on that.
That's right.
I think that council needs to appoint the individual that you select, and if you would like to change that every 6 months, then you would have to go through that process of having council appoint the individual. So it's not written into the code where you could just rotate one member in and out.
Okay, thank you.
That is right. I mean, Mr. Sievers, how dedicated are you to this? I mean, it may be...
I stand on what I said before. If I am willing to do it, if no one else wants to do it, that's my position. And I would prefer somebody else doing it, but we need to have a representative.
I mean, I think it would also be good to ask council to consider maybe modifying the code to allowing some rotational, so it's not on one person, but that's just me. And this has to be a board decision if that's something that the board would want to do. Because I sat on that board and I wasn't that happy. But I would be willing to do it here and there, but it's very difficult for me to come to this meeting when we changed the times. So
if Severe was here, I'd dump it right on him.
But,
For all practical purposes, how would you identify who would identify the monthly meeting? If, I mean, you can't talk outside of the meeting here, and you would need to determine it in advance who is going to be going to.
Right, obviously, I would expect that. But it would only be those members that said, hey, I'm willing to step up. I would be willing to step up if that was the case and take 1 or 2 meetings a year.
And I think we could put it on our agenda for this meeting to say who's attending the next. You know, we could resolve it in this meeting about who's going to attend the next meeting.
Okay, well, what I would suggest then is that we'll have to bring it up to city council to modify that code section, if that's this group's direction.
I mean,
I'd like to see if they will do that, because I also would be happy to do it every now and then, but I don't want to commit to every meeting on top of these.
yes, and I would say this, that for those of you that haven't gone to TC, it's a very worthwhile, but I also think it's good for them to get a perspective of planning and zoning on this as well. Because they don't have that perspective like you guys do.
So rather than appoint or recommend an appointment tonight, would you like to make a recommendation to council that that language be looked at, modifying it to allow for the rotation of members?
All right, we've got 3 here, it says yes, so.
I would like to also, I would be willing to rotate also, but I cannot do that full-time either.
So yes, do we need to make a motion?
Are you good with that?
Go ahead, Brad.
I just want to interject here. There's some history you should be aware of if you're going to be considering asking council to look at language in the code. What we found was the TEC was created as a subcommittee of the P&Z many decades ago. And then it was later, and it had one responsibility, and that was stormwater review. And then later on, it was given some additional responsibilities per P&Z's request. And then it was later created as a formal body, separate from the P&Z, but then there was that one member from the P&Z that was always on the TEC as well. So it was always reporting back to the P&Z as to what the TEC was doing. So in the initial purpose, it changed to what it is today, and right now they have a very broad purview of items that they look at. But they don't get site development permits brought before them, anything of that nature. So they provide environmental recommendation to the council and to you. So if you're going to ask the council to look at the role and responsibility of having someone on the P&Z be on the TEC, maybe that's something you just need to consider, whether that's even something you want to ask maybe to be removed, since they're a separate body now, or the rotation idea.
Do you see the value in participating in TEC, I guess is the question there.
Conversely, could we have a member of their current board report to this board once a month versus us attending there once a month?
That would be a modification we could consider. That's not the way it's written now,
I
obviously.
understand that's not the way I'm just saying if what you're saying is it was set up this way for a reason so that there's some reporting relationship, then it sounds like there are maybe at least 3 opportunities. One, current state, another, a rotation of us to there, and a third, that they have someone, just any member, that is on our agenda once a month to report on their activities.
We'll look at all options and come up with some sort of a creative, smart response from staff end.
I will say this. I see value with a TEC member, or with the planning and zoning member on that board. And the reason why I say this is it reminds that person, because you have that obligation to come back to this board and bring up environmental concerns. I had learned so much about LEED building, being way back when. Now we don't even talk about it. But my point is that, so that got me into something that at that time was brought before this board, and I had a perspective that I wouldn't have had I not been sitting on that commission or that committee. And so I'm just saying it brings value both ways. I was able to let the Environmental Commission know you need to be more active. If you want change, you need to speak up and say something. At that time when I was on the board, they didn't want to ruffle feathers. But at the same time, I was able to come back on this board and push the environmental concerns.
What is the regular day that they meet? Wednesday at 5:30. Which Wednesday? I'm sorry? Oh.
The meeting in between your two P and Z meetings
Oh.
on Wednesday.
Their next meeting is on the 10th.
Okay.
So do we want to ask for the rotation first, and then if we can't get the rotation, then ask for them to report to us? Is
But
that?
then you got to consider the voting, are they going to be a voting member? Are they, because, are they,
I think right now what we're hearing is that we'll have to bring it before council for advisability to ask them for a better understanding of what council would like the board compositions to be, because there's obviously some confusion of what the role should be for the P and Z member who's reporting to TEC. There's not one member of P and Z who wants to perform that role, and there's a request to have it rotate if that's what your role is going to be. But then there's also the question of possibly having a TEC member report to you. And so we'll look at what possible options council could consider in an advisability that they review that section to see what its usefulness is. That's what I'm getting from this conversation.
okay. So are we good? All right, then I guess we're adjourned.